Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I hope you guys are doing all right today. Apologies that I couldn't necessarily make it yesterday. Something came up in regards to my travels. I will be leaving here tomorrow, so you will not see me tomorrow, but you will see me Friday at a new location, a new place, same show, all of that good stuff. My guest is here. I have a massive show. Today is a massive show. Jeff Rich is going to be here. Garland Nixon is going to be here. Shobhan Saxena is going to be here. Professor Marandi, Alex Craner, Lawrence Wilkerson, and Dennis Fritz. So yes, this is going to be a massive show. One of my guests is here right now, a favorite of mine, Dr. Jeff Rich. How you doing, Jeff? You doing okay today?
I'm very well, Jamal. Yourself?
I am doing
star-packed show you have tonight.
Yeah. It's a big show. I was trying to make up for not being here on Thursday. And so I was trying to effectively pack everybody in so I can still get the full week of guests. But that means I'm going to be up until like 12:30. So it will be a late night. And just for the audience, Dr. Jeff Rich. Dr. Jeff Rich, he's a historian, author, retired government official in Melbourne, Australia, with a PhD in history and over 3 decades of experience in government. He created the Burning Archive YouTube channel and Substack, where he shares commentary, book reviews, interviews on world history, culture, and politics. He's written a book, 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. Now, you guys may hear a lot of rain here because it's pouring down. Here, and it's thundering and lightning. So forgive me if there are flashes and stuff like that. Jeff, speaking of 13 ways of looking at a bureaucrat, I am very curious on your take about something. It's something that you hit on your channel, and I don't have an answer for it. You did a commentary on it, and so I thought I would get your take on it. I want to give just a bit of context, just for the audience, though. I believe this was Sky News, if I'm not mistaken. Listen to, yeah, okay, good. So this is the U.S. State Department, former U.S. State Department advisor. He was on Australian Sky News. This shocked me because I can't believe that this was actually played on air.
Indefinitely.
In fact, the opposite is true. My sources tell me that the ratio of Ukrainian to Russian dead is 36-1. So it's the Ukrainians who are approaching 1 million or so casualties. The numbers that people are told by the mainstream media in the United States, particularly the New York Times and the Washington Post, bear about as much resemblance to reality as the numbers that the government told Americans what was going on in the Vietnam War. So the war of attrition that Russia did begin in 2022 it has been largely successful.
That is not a point of view that is typically shared on mainstream media, which is why I'm shocked that they played that on air and that they put that gentleman on and maybe they didn't know what he was going to say.
Especially the Murdoch-controlled mainstream media. Sky News is Murdoch. It's a very
yes.
People talk about Sky News after dark in Australia.
Is that what they call it? Sky News after dark?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. You did a piece.
So he seems to be a bit of a whistleblower. I've not heard him before, but that's quite a startling revelation. I mean, I don't know what his role or level of status in the State Department is, whether he's affiliated with, the sort of Trumpists or other. But, that is not even what, the White House has been saying in recent times, really, is it?
No, this is James Corden, former U.S. State Department advisor on Russia. I guess the reason why I'm showing that, and the reason why I'm asking this question in this way, you made the point of saying, basically, the way of trying to end this war. Like, is there, what would diplomats seeking a peace in this war even look like? And I guess my thing is, how would you do that? How would a bureaucrat go about seeking peace in a conflict like this when all of these different sides are pulling in particular directions? Nobody is really being honest about it. This guy is finally coming out saying the honest truth. But if you notice the way the question was asked, he had to effectively say, dude, you're getting this so wrong. And then kind of explain reality to him. How would a diplomat go about trying to get this settled, especially considering how do you trust the U.S. in this process?
Well, that is definitely a barrier, isn't it? And, the Russians have said this over time about whether, the United States is agreement capable.
Yeah.
But the tenor of the video I put out was really to say you've got to go through a bit of a process from moving from active conflict to kind of bring down the temperature a bit and explore what the other party's needs are in order to have some reasonable, just settlement that meets the needs of all the parties to the conflict, and explores, genuine options that addresses the root causes of the conflict as they are perceived by the different parties. And part of the issue that bureaucrats need to do is they need to take off their sort of partisan, nationalist sort of hat and say, well, how does someone else look at this issue? So, if I were a US State Department official, I'd be asking, well, how do the Russians see this issue? What sorts of things can we do that would actually genuinely respond to the root causes? But I guess I'd also be asking that of the Ukrainians, the Europeans, and also the British, because I guess what I perceive one of the barriers being in terms of developing a genuine peace agreement at the moment is, well, effectively the United States is trying unilaterally to sort of, make a peace deal, have a grand announcement like the Gaza peace deal, at a Budapest summit or something like that. But it's not really fully engaging, although it's a little bit ambiguous, the extent to which it's fully engaging with what the Russian needs are. The Russians are saying that there was some proposal put by Stephen Witkoff that seemed to acknowledge the root causes of the conflict and was a basis from which to work. And they're saying that at the Alaska summit, Vladimir Putin actually put a formal response to that. And they're sort of waiting for a US response. In the last day or two, there's been some sort of discussion about a sort of a document which is described as I think the term is a no paper, which is a sort of, let's just write it down without any official letterhead, like a working draft, something none of us are committed to, but let's just create a few options to discuss this. So there do seem to be signs that there are genuine exchanges of potential options between the United States and Russia at the moment. But I think ultimately they're also going to have to involve Europe, and they'll also have to involve Ukraine. It may just be a question of timing about when those states are kind of ready to genuinely engage. But I think that's what needs to happen. There needs to be open exploration of the actual real needs and a move towards conflict mitigation, towards generation of genuine peace options and, real negotiation, which people don't just sort of flip-flop day to day on, but actually commit to. And I think that's part of the dilemma the United States is in, because ever since February this year, when the first rapprochement happened and Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov met in Saudi Arabia, there's been some basic steps requested by Russia for the US to sort of demonstrate that it really does have the intent and does have the capability to actually not just escalate, not just threaten, but actually move towards peace, to re-establish, normal diplomatic relations, to do, a range of, really quite basic and minor practical things. And there's only been very, very slow progress on that. But there also does seem to be some sort of open exchange. None of us really know what it is. But if the foreign minister of Russia, the president of Russia are both saying that there is a concept that they've spoken about and they've talked about, which is of more substance than anything else that has been discussed so far. I mean, I guess that is progress, but it's limited progress, and I think it's held back, I think, by the way in which the United States has got so used to being, making its will immediately the way of the world. Donald Trump says something and it becomes the reality.
Right.
That they're getting frustrated. The United States is getting frustrated with the fact that, I mean, you mean I've got to work through all this detail about, where the borders are?
Right. Right.
That's not my country.
Yeah. Jeff,
so yeah.
I appreciate that. In a world where people were honest, pragmatic, practical, looking for actual outcomes, then that would be perfectly okay. That is not the way our world works. And the reason
I totally acknowledge that, and I guess, but I think that you got to believe that there are at least some people out there who do actually want to work in that way, and that at some point the situation is going to get to, a recognition of the kind of realities that ex-State Department official was talking about, that people will be driven to actually sort of negotiate in a different way. But, I also very much see the US being a little bit trapped, really, because they're sort of, they want to end the war. They can't end the war unilaterally. They keep trying to end the war, but then they can't actually get their allies on side. And the allies keep pushing them to escalate the war because that's the only way in which those allies can get the US to sort of take their interests into account. Some of those interests are really quite venal, like the current Ukrainian regime. And, I don't know if the current Ukrainian sort of regime is really going to be an effective negotiation party at any point in these negotiations. That regime might need to change before any sensible peace process can really sort of go forward.
Yeah, I don't think, for one, I don't think Europe wants to end the war. I don't think the Ukrainian government that's in power can end the war. I think Zelensky knows that basically the Nazi regime, the Banderites, they're done. If they have to cede territory, Zelensky knows his life will be at stake if he signs anything that says I'm ceding territory or effectively a surrender document. Europe, I think, strongly wants to keep the United States engaged because in their mind, well, this keeps the US and NATO, this keeps the US engaged. Hell, it may even be more cynical than that in the sense of, well, we need Ukraine to keep dying to give us time, almost like a military maneuver. We need you to die for us as we get prepared to maybe fight ourselves. I don't know what Trump wants. I think Trump wants to end it on American terms, which is nonsense when you've effectively lost the war. So it's like Russia has given the exact same demands from the very beginning, and they have escalated the demands in the context of, okay, well, we are now standing on these additional territories. So these are part of the Russian Federation. So are you going to accept it? Yay or nay? And when they say nay, they keep going. So if you're the Russians, from your point of view, why would you deviate from your demands when it is obvious you're winning and you're going to take Donbass either way? Meaning whether we get it on the negotiating table or whether we take it in 6 months, we're going to take Donbass. And we're probably even going to go and get Odessa. So it's like we're giving you the opportunity to come to terms with the fact that you've lost this. I don't think Europe can do it. And I don't think a hegemon that still has this kind of level of hubris that is built into Donald Trump can accept those terms. So it's like, I accept what you're saying. There are honest actors out there that want this war to end. I'm one of them. I'm just not in the negotiations. You have a bunch of cynical people with, let's say, objectives that run contrary. And let's be also honest. Europe doesn't care about Ukrainians any more than the US cares about Ukrainians. So it's like, it's not like Europeans are dying. Well, they are, but not in this mass scale. And it's not like Americans are dying. It's, well, somebody else is dying. So, you know, the fervor that may be there doesn't exist. I give you one example, and I'll bring in Crinky. This is this British-led plan. They got all of these Ukrainians killed in a dumb mission that the Brits ultimately didn't care about because they weren't Brits carrying out the mission. Or this combined arms warfare that they talk about, which doesn't apply in modern warfare. Like, they don't care. The feedback mechanism that would typically be there from a state being at war and people dying in that state doesn't exist. These are just Ukrainians. So what if they die? That seems to be the issue that is also built into this. Give me a take on that. I mean, am I being too cynical in the way that I'm looking at this?
Look, not necessarily. I mean, I think the British are a particularly noxious actor. I can't quite think of what the right word is. Perfidious Albion in this process. And they, I mean, I feel they have more interests in the survival of the sort of, you know, anti-Russian Ukrainian project than anyone really, more so than Europe. I mean, it's their sort of their military presence, the intelligence military presence in Eastern Europe. Really, I think there's an awful lot of operations and prestige and other sorts of things vested by the British in this Ukrainian operation. So I tend to think of them as a little bit separate from the European Union.
I see.
There are people who, and I think, I think someone should just tell the British to get the hell out of Europe and, never come back. But, I'm an Australian, so, and the European Union's complex because there's the range of views. You have the extreme Russophobes. There are people who seem to think that Europe might be planning a war against Russia. I find that really hard to believe in any. I mean, there might be some ideological zealots, but I really find it hard to believe that that is a serious proposition. I have read in some of the Ukrainian media a view that Russia is doing okay economically now, but if the war continues for 2 to 3 more years, then it will crumble, kind of thing. So there might be a view amongst some of the Europeans that if they can hang in there for 2 to 3 years, they will get the prize of both Russian assets plus Ukraine. That was sort of like an economic war of attrition, if you like. So that is feasible, and that could be the case. But I just can't really see the European countries as seriously wanting to escalate the military conflict because the risks are so high. On the other hand, what will Europe do if the Ukrainian government collapses in some way or the military collapses, say, within the next 6 months? The US presumably won't come in, although there'll be a lot of moral pressure on them. They will almost certainly enter into the conflict. So I think there probably are contingency plans for that kind of thing. And then you get into the question of, well, where are the borders? What's the new Ukraine? What are the circumstances? And I think in some ways it's in no one's interest that there be a rapid collapse. It's not in Russia's interest. It's certainly not in Ukraine's interest. It's not in Europe's interest. It's not in the American cynical political interest to see the Trump government's political interest to see a rapid collapse of Ukraine either, because however much they fudge it, they will be blamed.
Yes.
But, it will create
Yes.
a really disastrous humanitarian situation, and it will create, a very volatile situation with, as you say, the sort of right-wing extremists within the current government who could do anything, and, a lot of resentment and all that sort of thing. So that's why I feel it's quite a volatile situation with a lot of differing views that will partly be contingent, will adapt to sort of circumstances, if you like. That's
The thing is,
where I see it.
Trump can always walk. I mean, I know some people are like, well, he can't. Trump could walk. I mean, also, what's wild about it too, we have Donald Trump with him effectively bought out the Budapest summit after the 2.5-hour conversation with Putin. Lavrov and Rubio talks, and then all of a sudden it's thrown into question because the U.S. seems shocked that the Russian perspective hasn't changed. And it's like, why are you shocked? Like, it's amazing. Like, they seem to be so out of touch with reality. From the Russian point of view, this is existential, meaning it doesn't matter what you do. If you want to put in Tomahawks, if you want to add in M16s, if you want to add whatever you add, or F-16s, whatever you add, we are going to continue. And if you don't accept terms, then we will continue. Now, maybe what Europe thinks is, well, this overextends Russia. If Russia has to, pull up 3 million men to occupy the entirety of Ukraine, well, that bogs them down for anything else that they may have to do, not to mention reconstruction and everything else. It's hard to know what's going on in the Europeans' heads, per se, because they seem to be completely delusional. You mentioned this notion of the Russian economy collapsing. The European economy is collapsing around them. I mean, look at Germany. Have you seen the report for Germany recently where they were talking about the auto jobs that have been lost? What is it? Lufthansa has been cutting the number of flights because they can't necessarily afford to keep the airlines going. Hundreds of thousands of jobs have been lost. That's just Germany. France, the government can't even keep afloat because of the economic morass that they're in. Britain, same thing. Meaning these deeply unpopular leaders of these countries that seem to be burning down around them, if their assessment is, well, Russia, if we give them 2 years, they'll run into trouble. It's like, okay, dude, you're in trouble now.
I mean, it's not a view that I hold. I'm just saying that there are people within Ukraine who seem to have that view. So, I'm not so pessimistic about the European economy. I think it's a lot more resilient and robust than maybe some of you might like to present it. But but I mean, it's a big economy. It's got lots of issues. The reason Thomas Garland called economics the dismal science is there's always economic issues. Yeah, but I mean, one big issue though is the war debt. Like, the Ukraine has incurred enormous debts in prosecuting this war. And when you say the US can walk, yes, it can walk, but there's, I think they're talking about like 140 billion euro that Europe needs to sort of fess up to over the next 12 months or so, or else literally Ukraine will actually, I mean, if you want to talk about economic collapse, that will be an economic collapse. It will be a catastrophe. It will be like Germany in the early 1920s type economic collapse.
There lies the rub, Jeff. That's why they're going to steal the Russian money. They're going to take that
money.
Well,
and that's what the whole repatriation kind of thing is. But whether, I guess it's the question of, when and how that is done. And there's an increasing view within Ukraine too that Europe, may not be able to come up with this level of money. And part of the tension between Europe and the United States, part of the dance that they're doing about them also is, well, really, United States, you started this war, you led this war, you urged us to partake in this war, you equipped us and armed us to fight this war, and now you just want to walk out and get us to pay you for the privilege? Seriously?
We're done. I was like, that's Joe Biden's war. Joe Biden should pay for it.
Joe Biden's war, yeah, sure.
Yep.
I think there is an element of you broke it, you fix it principles sort of really that needs to perhaps apply to the United States actions, and as probably part of the sort of back scenes discussion. It's not really the kind of thing that gets played out in the public sort of scene. So I think there are all these tensions. It's interesting too that Orban may play some sort of role in a subsequent meeting. I mean, there's obviously a bit of water to go under the bridge before this event really happens.
Do you think it's going to happen? I've heard Alexander McCurris was making the point of saying this event will completely happen. Don't believe any of the nonsense about this meeting is off and everything else. And even Trump was like, well, give me a couple of days and I'll let you know.
Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, really, I think. But the statement from the Russian spokesperson, I'm just quickly checking the Russian Kremlin thing here. It says that they discussed, I'm just trying to find it. They discussed the... here we go. It was agreed the representatives of both countries would immediately begin preparations for the summit, and they didn't agree the possibility of holding another personal meeting. The representatives would begin preparations for the summit, so there's a plan for a plan, which could potentially be organised in Budapest, for instance. So, Rubio and Lavrov had a telephone conversation, which was about implementing understandings,
right? And
there's all this silly media nonsense about whether or not it's been postponed, that kind of thing. To organise a summit like that, you need to have there needs to be serious work done into it. And clearly, I don't think there was really a lot of serious work really done for the Alaska summit. I think the serious work was the Russian response to whatever the Witkoff proposal is. I suspect the Russians got there, and like I've seen ministers, heads of government type meetings proceed in this way. The leaders quite like to have the ceremonial grandeur of everyone preparing the wonderful lunch and the big meeting, and they get there and they say, "Oh, look, we can do this in 20 minutes, can't we, Joe? Why don't we do that and head off early?" It's sort of a lot of these people.
So you've seen that happen before, where they're like, "Dude, we don't need to
totally."
be here for okay.
And often, diplomats, junior officials, all that sort of stuff, they put their life's work into organising the lunch and the various agenda papers, but it's not really what the leaders are so focused on. And the actual business the real leaders really need to focus on is something much more smaller or more concrete or more specific. So I suspect the Alaska thing was Putin saying, well, your concept has some legs, but you need to adapt it in a certain way.
Agreed.
And Trump basically listening for once in his life, perhaps.
Well, and not coming back
to whatever Putin said,
which is the Russian point of view. It's like, okay, we never got a response, and my thing is, you kind of did get a response. I mean, they increased this oil war. Well, they were working with Ukraine to effectively destroy the oil industry to kind of for some level of leverage. So obviously Trump's issue is I want to deal with this from a position of strength because I'm a hegemon and I'm a king. Yeah. And the Russian position is, dude, you have no cards and nothing that you do is going to change, this inexorable process that's happening. Yeah. Either you come to a deal or you don't. No, it's fascinating. Jeff, thank you for this, man. I really do appreciate it. Is it raining there? I'm curious. I mean, you're only a couple of hours away.
We've had like really wild, stormy, windy weather in Melbourne today, really. So I don't think it's raining at the moment, but it's been kind of quite wild and stormy.
Yeah,
so.
We're under the same sky. For some reason, I'm always enamored by that. It's like we're under the same sky. Jeff, thank you for this, man. Really good breakdown. I am always fascinated. Look, there are some people who I bring on who've been in government and many people who've been outside of government, meaning these are two very different points of view. And the people who are in government usually have a certain, let's say, way of looking at this that is very different than people who are just looking at the plane from above, which is why I'm always interested in bringing in people who are either in the military or, for that matter, in the government process where they can give me, okay, how does this look from inside as opposed to what we're just seeing on the outside. I always appreciate this. Thank you for this.
Thank you,
and just what audience will know, The Burning Archive, I keep saying it is a fantastic channel. Definitely check Jeff out. Dr. Jeff Rich, historian, author, retired government official from Melbourne, Australia, with a PhD in history and over 3 decades of experience in government. He created the Burning Archive YouTube channel and Substack, where he shares commentaries, book reviews, interviews, and world history, culture, and politics. Jeff, you're going to have to bring me in for one of those book reviews. I am super interested in geeking out with you on this stuff. He has written books including 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. Jeff, you have a fantastic rest of your night, man. Thank you for this.
Okay. Ciao. Enjoy the show, Jamal.
Bye-bye. All right. Great conversation with Jeff. I want to go to my next guest, Shobhan Saxena. How you doing, Shobhan? You doing okay this morning?
Hi, Jamal. I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. Shobhan, he's an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. In a career spanning more than 30 years, he has reported on the Times of India, The Hindu, The Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he's an international correspondent for DD India, the international channel for India's public broadcaster. In Sao Paulo, damn good food. Damn good food. Shobhan, I guess there are two main things I want to hit. One has to do with Trump in the Caribbean, since you're in Brazil, and Lula effectively slamming Trump for going after Venezuela, Colombia, etc. And the other one I want to hit is this weird mythical conversation that Trump claimed that he had with Modi that apparently didn't exist, where Trump was claiming that, well, Modi said that he was going to cut Russian energy. And India comes out and is like, yeah, dude, no, we have no idea what you're talking about. Let's go to the first one first. Lula came out recently and gave what seems to be a fiery speech, effectively pointing out that, look, Venezuela is not going to be Brazil. Brazil is not going to be Venezuela. And this notion of Donald Trump effectively attacking Venezuela needs to stop. Right here. Here it is. Damn it. There it was. Give me your take on that. I'm going to pull up the video. What is the sense that you're getting in Brazil on these attacks that are taking place in the Caribbean? I mean, Donald Trump has been murdering people in boats left and right, not just from Venezuela, from Colombia. There was a guy from Trinidad and Tobago. And this is completely lawless. And yet, I've seen very little pushback coming from the United States. And I've heard a bit more pushback coming out of Petro. Yeah. Give me a take on this. This was Lula's first comment that I heard on this. This was why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah. Okay. It's a matter of great concern for the whole region, actually. I mean, if you look at the history of South America, there has not been a war in South America for more than 120 years. I mean, the last war happened in the 19th century between Paraguay and Brazil. And that was also not a big war. Of course, the Paraguay suffered a lot. And there's not been a war, except unless you consider here Lula talking about, Brazil will never be Venezuela, Venezuela will not be Brazil, and we are all different countries, we have our own destiny. So basically he's responding to what's going on in the waters of Caribbean for the past few months. It's kind of muscle flexing but it's no longer muscle flexing. They're actually attacking boats and so-called drug submarines, and nobody knows actually for real whether these people are drug smugglers or ordinary fishermen and people who are using their boats for fishing, for anything else. So I think it's a great concern, and it's very important because Lula is going to meet Trump in Malaysia, I think next week, during the APEC summit, which is going to happen very soon. So I think before meeting Trump, I think Lula is making his position, Brazil's position, and position of the most countries in South America very clear that nobody wants a war in South America. Now, let me put this in context. Of course, there has been some friction between the Lula government and Maduro government in Venezuela because after the last elections in Venezuela, the Brazilian government didn't recognize the election results immediately, and there has been some friction, to be honest. But that doesn't mean that that Brazil is okay with, or Brazil wants a war in South America, or wants the Americans to will approve of American attack on Venezuela. There's this line that Brazil will become Venezuela has been used repeatedly by the far right in this country, because they try to brand Venezuela as a failed socialist model. And when they want to attack the Lula government, they often use that example. Oh, Venezuela has failed and Brazil will fail too if you have socialist policies. This is basically welfare policies, nothing socialist about it,
Yeah.
But I think, there has been strong statement from Lula, also the president of Colombia, because Colombia is much closer to Venezuela and it has Caribbean just there, that's the border. So I think people are concerned. But I think till now, it's been muscle flexing, show of his strength. They're trying to scale. I think the larger picture here is the Americans, basically CIA, and they've openly admitted that it's a CIA. It's no longer a covert operation, it's an open operation. They want a regime change in Venezuela. That's it. By bringing the forces, the frigates and ships, and they're attacking these boats, and more importantly, the Nobel Peace Prize given to a politician,
Yes.
who's at best a very shady character, and this is kind of irony because Donald Trump was expecting Nobel Peace Prize, and it went to Marina in Venezuela, and she dedicated the Peace Prize to Donald Trump. So I think this is basically a very typical Western plot, how to do regime change in an emerging or developing country. You give the Peace Prize to an opposition leader who has no credibility, who has lost elections, but she is supported for a long time. It's not, she's been working with the Americans since the time of George Bush Jr. So a long association. So they want, go on.
No, please, finished. I'm sorry. No.
Yeah, so I think, Nobel Peace Prize, military at the gates, ships, using weapons, killing people. The whole idea is some kind of regime change operation in Venezuela. But in my opinion, it's not going to happen, and nobody's going to like it in South America. Maybe the president of Argentina, Javier Milei, may approve it, but I don't think there's any support from any other government. There are 12 countries in South America, and nobody wants a military conflict here, and nobody wants this kind of regime change, forced regime change, with threat of military aggression and covert operations, and you throw in the Nobel Peace Prize also. Nobody's very happy about it. So that is the wider picture I'm talking about. Of course, there are people here in Brazil, the countries who support a regime change in Venezuela. No, people from the far right who closely aligned with the U.S. interest. They are, but that's a small group, small minority, and nobody wants a war in this region. There has not been a war. This is the kind of something very specific about South America. It's a peaceful continent. There's no big conflict. There are no frontiers which are disputed. Countries live with each other peacefully. So I think this is nobody expecting it. Nobody wants it.
There's also this other element of the U.S. asserting almost like a paternal control over South America, which I would imagine, considering all the coups that the United States was responsible for, not to mention the kill squads, that this is deeply problematic in the way that they're looking at this. This is Gustavo Petro. He has been very outspoken, especially to some of the people that Trump murdered were Colombians.
Le solicito al presidente Trump contener su codicia petrolera.
Contain his oil greed.
Pensar en la humanidad.
Think about humanity.
Pensar en la eficacia
Think about
de
the
una
effectiveness
América
of the greed of America.
Una América grande es una América en
The great
donde
America
los
is one where the
pueblos que
people
habitan las
inhabiting the
Américas,
Americas,
desde Alaska,
from Alaska to
hasta la
Patagonia,
Patagonia,
without
sin
exclusion,
exclusión, dialogan.
discuss the common problems. Obviously, he is talking about the wrong guy in this case, right? Do you see all of these countries coming together as a, I don't know, in some way to rebuff what Trump is doing here and working in coordination? Right now, they seem to be working, I'm not going to say cross purposes, but almost as singletons. And one of my guests, Esteban made the point of saying Latin America need to get themselves together because America is coming for them, like this new Monroe Doctrine 2.0. Have you seen an aggregation of energies in order to push back against what the U.S. is doing?
Yeah, it is happening, but slowly. Of course, this is Monroe Doctrine on steroids. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's very clear. I mean, it's ironic again. When Donald Trump, when he was running for president, he was talking of America first and not getting involved in this forever wars and bringing peace to the world. And here's opening a new front, a front which has been not open for centuries. There has not been a war in this part of the world, except for if you consider the British war against Argentina in the Falkland Islands, which we call Malvinas here. But that was also a small conflict. But and Americans and the British had differences at the time because Americans, they have always considered South America to be their backyard. But I think the situation has changed a lot in the past 20, 30 years. There have been very popular governments here, big leaders like Lula, Petro, and in Chile and other countries, even Argentina, leaders like Cristina Kirchner, and they have really asserted their position very well. You know, they have asserted their strength. They have asserted the solidarity of the region very, very strongly. So I think there's a new sense of solidarity in this region. It's no longer, the Americans may consider this to be their backyard, but I think the South Americans don't see themselves as a backyard anymore. I mean, Brazil is a huge country. It's one of the top 10 economies in the world. It's a member of BRICS, member of G20. You know, it's a growing economy, big country, 220 million people, fifth largest country in the world, fifth biggest democracy in the world. So it's not a joke taken from these countries. And it's very clear from what Petro was talking about, President Petro. It's about oil. Actually, Venezuela has huge reserves of oil. Brazil too. And Guyana has found, you know, a new source of oil. So I think the South America can be self-sufficient, not only self-sufficient in petroleum, but they are net exporters of petroleum to other countries. Of course, Venezuela has been suffering these sanctions for years, you know, and it's just basically, it's the sanctions which have destroyed their petroleum industry and badly affected their economy. It's not that it's a badly managed country. You know, a country which is rich in energy resources, but you don't allow them to export it, what's going to happen? Of course, they're going to suffer. So that is a plan. I think the Americans, like, you know, Middle East, the politics or geopolitics has always been around petroleum, petrodollar. I think they want to replicate the same model in South America. It's not going to be that easy because there's going to be resistance. And I think nobody here is, given the history of American interference in South America, you know, the period of 1960s and 70s and 80s with the military dictatorships everywhere, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and very, very brutal military dictatorships, you know, in Chile, everybody knows about it. And people are not very happy with the situation. So I think the American interference here is seen in a very, very negative way, and Americans, unfortunately, are not very aware of it. Of course, they're planning to, you know, reduce their Atlantic relationship a bit. I don't see it happening because they're still, US is very much part of NATO. They're interested in selling their arms and weapons to NATO. America is not going to withdraw. from their position of global hegemon. I don't see that's happening either with Europe but I think they definitely have opened a new front in South America, and that is a matter of concern here.
Yeah, I can imagine. Let's move to India. This fascinates me to no end. The U.S. has a mistaken impression that a war that Russia considers to be existential is going to somehow be influenced with bluffs and threats, and that propaganda that is put to its own population is somehow going to affect other world leaders, as if Putin can't pick up the phone and says, "Hey, Modi, did you tell Trump this?" In which case Modi is going to say, "I have no idea what the hell he's talking about." Donald Trump recently came out trying to pressure Russia and said this, which I think my first response, I think I even tweeted it, like, this is nonsense until I get confirmation.
That's a big stop. It stopped. So I was not happy that India was buying oil. And he assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop. Now I got to get China to do the same thing.
Who does he think let's start at the beginning. Did Trump have a conversation with Modi when Modi assured him that he was going to stop buying Russian oil?
I think, Jamal, there are two aspects to this statement. The first one, from this statement, is very clear. The objective of the Ukraine war is not about democracy, it's not human rights, it's about a planned destruction of Russia. Destroy Russian economy, the same thing, and a regime change in Russia. That was the objective from very beginning. I remember when the war had just started and Biden went to Poland and Romania, and he said Putin cannot extend power. So right. That's what they were planning. They say that it will be a short war, and they expected it to be short war from their point of view. They thought that Russian economy will collapse and there will be a regime change, but it has not happened, and that is very, very disappointing for them. So all this pressure being put on India, China, other countries not to buy oil from Russia or to do business with Russia, I think they're definitely living in a fool's paradise, because the whole world, except for Europe and US, is doing business with Russia. It's not just petroleum. I mean, Russia is more engaged economically with the Middle East, with Africa, with Latin America, with other Asian countries. So I think because of American politics, you have to, it's all about managing headlines. They need to show they've done something. That's why Trump is saying he spoke to Indian Prime Minister and assured him. I mean, there's a very clear readout from the India's Ministry of External Affairs. They have not given any such commitment to US. And India has repeatedly said, not just once, that India will manage its energy security in their own interest. India doesn't need to worry about the interests of Europeans. And it's also, again, an irony. Europeans have been still buying gas from Russia. And for the past 20, 30 years, the whole European prosperities, especially the German and French and other countries, they have become prosperous buying cheap Russian gas. So are they going to return all that money back to Russia or other countries? So I think as an emerging country, as a developing country, India and China have an absolute right to buy petroleum or whatever they want to buy, arms and weapons from Russia or any other country. You can't put a check on them. You can't threaten them with tariffs and sanctions. And the tariff war is also not going anywhere. He's put 50% sanctions on India, on Brazil, 100% on China. What is the result? Nothing. It's not going to have, I think, of course, may have some negative impact in the short term. It's not going to have a long-term negative impact on Indian economy or Chinese or Brazilian economy or economy of any other emerging country. I think we've seen this film many times. It's the same film during Biden's time and Trump's time, the same film, putting pressure on India. And even if India cuts the, purchase of petroleum from Russia, for example, for the sake of imagination, how much is it? A few $1 billion? Do you think that's going to collapse the Russian economy? Right. Russia is a huge country. It's a very big economy. Russia is doing business with the whole world. And I think this is one thing they don't want to accept. And they don't want to tell their own people that the whole policy of trying to isolate Russia, which is always isolate Putin, they don't talk about Russia, has failed. because the world is engaging more with Russia than it was engaging with Russia earlier. I think the Indian pharmaceutical companies, IT companies, everyone, I think that I was in India recently for 15 days, and I saw how much things have going on between India and Russia in the positive sense. More trade, more business, more political engagement. President Putin will travel to India in November or December for the annual India-Russia meet, and we'll see more announcements. India is going to buy more S-400 missile systems from Russia. So I think this kind of pressure hasn't worked. India has made very clear a number of times it won't work with India. Of course, it won't work with China, because as emerging countries, we need to consider about our national interests and not about European interests or American interests or the games, geopolitical games they want to play. It's not going to work.
Do you see this, let's say, reshuffling American economic interests, or let's say interests of India, away from the States with these sanctions, with these tariffs? Because I think the issue that Trump is going to run into is kind of the same issue with Russia, where you put so many sanctions on Russia. I think it's like 20,000, some absurd amount, where the Russian economy became somewhat self-sufficient in the way that it operated, meaning it didn't need America in this sense. Is this the same thing that you see taking place in regards to India, or for that matter, even Brazil, where the normal economic levers that would typically go to America or get trade from America is being redirected to other aspects of the world to compensate for it, up until the point where America is just not necessary and it's isolated among these countries?
I mean, that is what is, I think, worrying Washington and Brussels. You know, they put like 1,400 sanctions, 14,000 sanctions, I think, against Russia.
Yeah.
Russia is not only just Russia survived, Russia is thriving, you know. So that proved that a country can do business with other countries. You don't need to depend on euro and dollar for your business. And then I think that's a big concern in Brussels and Washington, because the other countries are going to do the same. Of course, what is the attraction of doing business with the US and Europe is the currency, is stronger currency. But if you look at the numbers, I mean, US population is just 4% of the global population. And combined here, the US and Europe together is less than 10%. So we are talking about here 90% of humanity and growing countries. But Africa is a big possibility. Africa is growing, is a very, very vibrant continent. It's not the Africa of the old, you know, that broken political systems and no economy. That's not true anymore. Asia has very big countries, a country like Indonesia with 260 million people, you know, and other countries in the region, Latin America. So I think, and I've seen in Brazil, they put 50% tariff in Brazil on Brazilian companies. And what happened? They immediately diversified. More than 50 Brazilian coffee companies are now going to China to do business with China. And the Chinese are not coffee drinkers, but they're going to do business with China. So I think everyone is looking for more markets, more diverse system where people can do business with other countries and not solely depend on the US. So I think this tariff war started by Donald Trump has worked maybe with some countries like South Korea and Japan. Even then, also there was a lot of friction actually, but it's not going to work with big countries like China, India, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia. It's not going to work with big countries. You know, we have seen how the Chinese have reacted with the rare earth metals, restrictions on the export of rare earth metals, and there's an absolute panic in Washington about it. It's not, you know, we're not in that scenario that without the US support or without doing business with US, you could not survive. Countries will survive. They look for alternative markets. They look for more markets. There'll be more engagement of trade without the use of dollar. That's, I mean, is again a positive thing, because if countries can not use so much dollar, I think that will reduce the burden on their foreign reserves. So I don't think, yes, short term, there could be a problem. The economies may be affected, but I was looking at the figures coming from China. There was a small dip in the trade in the last quarter, but now the Chinese economy is going up again. Because Jamal, also you have to realize, as countries like India and China and Brazil, they're very big countries What drives our economy is the local economy. Local consumption is very important part of the growth story. They're not solely dependent on export or trade, and especially not with the Europe and US. And India has signed free trade deals with a lot of countries, including Europe, and UK and other countries. And India is now in the process of having a free trade deal with South America as well. So I think it's in the long term, this is going to be good news for emerging and developing countries.
What does BRICS fall into all of this? Because I have to be honest with you, the tariffs Donald Trump were effectively passing, I didn't think those had anything to do with the individual countries. I thought those had more to do with BRICS. Like Trump, oddly enough, of all presidents in the United States, acknowledges the dollar is under pressure. Now, no other president would admit this. Joe Biden wouldn't admit this. Obama wouldn't admit this. And this is despite the fact that the dollar, you can see it depreciating in value. And you can see it as a reserve currency, the amount of the dollar being used to depreciate. You can look at gold being at over 4,000 a bar at this point of $4,000, which again is pretty astonishing. I don't think gold has ever been this high. And so there's something going on in regards to the currency that Donald Trump seems to be responding to. And the way he's responding to it is by effectively attacking BRICS countries. I mean, if you look at the one with the highest tariffs, those countries belong to BRICS. He just can't do it with China in the way that he wants to. He can't assert its will. But South Africa, Brazil, India, etc.
Yeah, I think as I said correctly, he's the first American president to mention the word BRICS. I think I don't remember Biden or Obama even mentioning BRICS. But I think the people who are briefing Donald Trump about BRICS, they need to do a proper briefing, because he thinks that Spain is part of BRICS. And then he said, after his threat, countries are leaving BRICS or nobody wants to join BRICS. Yeah. This is the exactly opposite of the reality. BRICS now has 20 members and more associate members, and more countries want to join BRICS. So BRICS is actually growing both in size and influence, and not shrinking. So that is a completely wrong position. And also, he said BRICS was formed to attack the dollar. Not true. I mean, BRICS has a much bigger agenda or perspective. The purpose is not to attack dollar. Of course, the dollar has lost its position slowly and gradually over the past 30, 40, 50 years. And it will lose more, because the days of the hegemon are going to be over finally one day, if not in 5 years, in 10 years, And as countries become bigger and bigger economies like India, China, and Brazil, and Russia, and if they want to do trade in their own currencies, you can't do much about it. You already have done the worst. You put 50% tariff, 100% tariff. What else can you do? Are you going to break relations with the with BRICS countries completely? That's going to have more effect on the US than on the BRICS countries, actually, because it's it's a mutual trade. You have US has $750 billion trade with China. Are you going to decouple with China? Who's going to suffer? China. You can destroy China, but at what cost? Self-destruction.
I agree with you that it depends on how cynical you're being in regards to whether or not the entire point was to go after the dollar. I agree with you. It may not be a feature, but it is a bug. Like, come on. I've heard Putin give speeches where Putin was making the point of saying, look, you guys have taken us off the SWIFT system. What are we supposed to do? Or Putin has even made speeches where he pointed out the US used $10 trillion, just made it out of thin air. And if you can create $10 trillion out of thin air, what can you do with that money? And how can any other country that has to deal with real economic realities compete? So if the US decides, well, we want to go to war and we want to spend $10 trillion to do it, what can another country do to contest with that when we're just making this stuff up as we go along? And so if you are coming up with a system where countries are going to engage with each other either in a new currency for themselves to use, or at the very least use their own basket of currencies when they're engaging with each other, as a direct result of that, the entire point of it is to get around the use of the dollar. So the dollar can't be used as a weapon in the way that the dollar is currently used. I guess I always hear BRICS countries say, look, our job is not to hit the dollar. And my thing is always, okay, maybe it's not a feature, but it's damn sure a bug. Give me your thoughts on that.
When tariff war started, recently, and he was putting these tariffs on all the countries, and the country which started dumping the U.S. bond was actually Japan, not China. And Japan is a very, very close, everybody knows, a close ally or satellite country of the United States. So I think it's very evident that people have realized, the countries have realized that this U.S. bond doesn't have the power and strength it used to have. So basically, your countries are buying junk, actually. So you're spending your hard-earned money, your national currency, to buy bonds which has no value. So I think the decline of a US dollar is a reality, and this has been a reserve currency of the world for such a long time, 70, 80 years. It's not going to collapse in a day or two or a year or two, but I think the process has started. The process is gradual, and Americans know it, and that's why all this a lot of rumors about they were trying to convert their debt into cryptocurrency and this and that, and what they're trying to do. They're desperate, and Donald Trump himself talks about he's launching this golden Visa card and something because they want to earn money. And he said, if you can get money, you can repay the debt. So I think that is an elephant in the room in the US. $38 trillion of debt of a country whose GDP is $34-35 trillion. It's basically, in my opinion, a bankrupt economy because it's not a real economy. With that much debt and your GDP less than your debt, what kind of economy is that? So I think that they're worried about, and they think that if countries not give up dollar, it's not going to happen. But if they reduce the use of dollar, that's going to have a very negative impact on the U.S. economy. That is why all this, show and drama and screaming about, BRICS and threat to dollar. Nobody is threatening dollar. I think that the biggest threat to dollar is the U.S. economy itself.
That and Trump using it as a weapon, or the Biden administration using it as a weapon. I think it's like any unassailable weapon is going to be challenged, right? Like if I get a nuke, at some point, somebody else is going to get a nuke because you have to balance it out. Or if you put a missile in space, okay, then I'm by definition going to have to put a missile in space because I need the ability to challenge the fact that you have that. I need a balancer. I need to have something to countermand the weapon that you have at your disposal. Well, the U.S. decided to use the dollar as a weapon. And this was against what we initially said we were going to do, by the way, when we first took this position of the dollar being the reserve currency. It's completely against it. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think we created a monster on this, and other countries were like, we do not want to be at the behest of the United States if they decide they don't like our foreign policy or they don't like something that we're doing. Look at what they did to Venezuela, for God's sake, right? So no, I agree with you on this. Where do you think this goes, by the way? Do you think these tariffs get rolled back? Do you think these tariffs are just a fact of life going forward, and these countries are just going to have to work around them until they get to the point where they have less impact? How do you think this resolves, or does it resolve? Does India come to some kind of agreement with the United States?
Yeah, I think that the trade talks between India and US have been going on for 9-10 months, and they've not reached an agreement. And the Indian position is very clear that India has to protect the core of its economic interest, the domestic market, the farmers, the dairy, poultry. India is not going to make a compromise on this issue. It's very, very clear. I think also countries like Brazil and China have taken very clear position. I think what has happened, Jamal, because the tariff wars, the world has realized that the US is not a reliable trading partner. You can't do trade with the country and keep threatening them all the time, hiking the tariff, then roll it back. The business trade doesn't work like this. And that's why the countries are now looking for alternative markets. They're looking for new sources to buy things from, and also new markets where they can buy their stuff. Because still the tariff war is going on. How can you have any business with them? And has he managed to sign deal with, as he said, he'll sign in 90 days with 100 countries. How many countries can he sign deal with?
It's like two, like the European Union, maybe.
Yeah, European Union, which is basically a vassal of the United States, and South Korea and Japan also, again, vassals of the United States. But the countries which have which are developing, emerging, they need to protect their economy, and they're not going to buckle under pressure from Donald Trump on this issue.
And Shobhan, always appreciate these conversations, man. Thank you for this. You are a fantastic reporter.
Thank you.
I got to be honest, I miss doing that for the every so often the show would send me to locations to be a reporter. I used to love that, like being on location and being able to kind of get the details. So I thank you for this. I appreciate it. Shobhan Saxena, he is a good friend of the show. He is an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, in a career spanning more than 30 years. I can't believe you've been doing this for 30 years. That is fantastic. He has reported from the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he is an international correspondent for DD India, International Channel of India's public broadcaster. Shobhan, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this. Be safe, okay?
Thank you for the invite, and nice to talk to you again. Thanks.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. All right, Shobhan is awesome. Shobhan is awesome. Garland is going to be up in roughly 20 minutes or so, give or take. I would like to hit a story before Garland comes on in my own segment. There's something very strange going on in regards to the Budapest conversation back and forth, the whole Tomahawk thing and everything else. It is very strange. It is very odd. And it is somewhat difficult to come down on one specific line in regards to what's taking place. And I will cut this as an individual segment. Donald Trump comes out and says, I'm going to do Tomahawks. Okay. I initially said it was a bluff. The closer we got to it, and because of Putin's mild response to it, my thought was, okay, maybe it's not a bluff, especially if indeed this is going to come around where the White House doesn't look at this as being something that Russia is going to deal with significantly. Trump and Putin has a 2.5-hour phone call. After that phone call, Trump backs away from the Tomahawks, humiliates Zelensky, gets across them, this ain't happening, and he goes back to Ukraine, embarrassed, without the Tomahawks. Then it comes up, there will be a summit in Budapest, and we're going to talk, we're going to have a conversation, and we are going to, I guess, try to quote unquote end the war. Now, Russia had said prior that Witkoff came to them with an agreement. This is what they were saying. They said in Alaska, Putin apparently gave his response to that agreement. And if you remember at the Alaska summit, when Donald Trump came out, both of them were talking as if they had the contours of something, even though they wouldn't necessarily disclose exactly what that something was. All right, fast forward. Donald Trump still in search of leverage. So still arming Ukraine, still backing these kind of terrorist attacks that are taking place. And of course, going with this notion of an oil war to try to get some kind of leverage. As Donald Trump is doing this oil war in order to try to get some kind of leverage, the Russians still go with the framing, we are waiting and we are still under the Alaska purview. Basically what we talked about at the Alaska summit, we still await Donald Trump's response. And so regardless of this other stuff, that is what we're going with. All right, fair enough. So the Russians are effectively waiting on a response from Trump. Now, I would argue that the fact that Donald Trump was running an oil war, on some level is a response, but the Russians weren't looking at it that way. They were still looking at it as, we are going to maintain a diplomatic track as we continue with the war. We can do both. We can proceed with the war. And it is very possible that what takes place on the ground may actually affect the diplomacy, quote unquote, that's taking place. So no, the United States doesn't believe that it's in a position where they need to accept the deal now. But when Donbass falls, maybe. If Kiev falls, maybe. When Odessa falls, maybe. Now, I think there are going to be other pressures that are going to be at work, but that may be the way they're thinking about it. There's nothing stopping us from doing two things at once, from chewing gum and walking. We can do both. The US can do whatever they want to do. They have no cards in this process. And if the Europeans try to put troops in, well, that will be an escalation and we would have to deal from there. But that's not our reality right now. Our reality is taking apart the Ukrainian military piece by piece. And what they've been doing is annihilating the capability of Ukraine to produce energy. Now, the last I checked, it was like 50% of Ukraine's capability of producing energy was out of whack, was gone, just eliminated. The Russians had fundamentally destroyed it. Who was going to supply Ukraine with energy in the winter? You would imagine that Europe would have to do that, but Europe doesn't even have their own energy to do it, in the sense of their prices going through the roof. This is a playbook, right? They're running a plan in the way they're taking Ukraine apart. There are cauldrons all throughout Ukraine. Petros seems like it's at the brink of collapse, where there are cauldrons around Petros, or Petros is surrounded. I may be pronouncing that wrong, forgive me. Fighting Seversk, Kupiansk, and a list of other cities where Ukraine doesn't seem to have the manpower or the material might in order to push back the Russians. So you have a situation where Ukraine is losing and being pushed back on all fronts. Donald Trump at one point mentioned that there was going to be an offensive that Ukraine was planning on running, but I haven't seen anything about Ukraine running any kind of offensive. They probably don't have the manpower to do it, and they are probably anywhere where they need to defend and they send manpower means that there's a gap somewhere else in the lines. This is a recipe for disaster. This is a snowball at work, meaning however long they can keep this up, at some point, this is going to get worse and worse and worse. And when Russia takes Donbass, all hell breaks loose. Now, when Trump brings Zelensky into the meeting, and this is the part that gets very weird, Trump brings Zelensky into the meeting, and the reporting, which I actually believe, is that he told Zelensky, Putin told me he will destroy Ukraine if you don't accept their terms. Now, this immediately gets leaked. Zelensky goes to a safe space in Europe. They pat him on the head. They tell him everything is going to be okay. And they put out a worded letter that they're back in Ukraine. Now, one of the other parts of the reporting is that Donald Trump, after Zelensky is like, well, no, we're not giving up anything, Trump said, okay, well, let's have a ceasefire along the current lines of contact. Okay, that's weird. How do you go from they will annihilate you to, okay, well, let's just have a ceasefire, everybody go home and everybody declare victory? Those are two radically different positions, right? They will annihilate you and, okay, everybody just go home. The fact that Donald Trump even imparted that they will destroy Ukraine if you keep this up gets across his real thinking about the war. None of this, well, I believe Ukraine can win this and Europe just needs to give them more money and everything will be great. Okay, well, that's obviously nonsense. They will destroy you if you keep this up. But what Donald Trump eventually came out with was, hey, why don't we just, have a ceasefire along the current lines, everybody go home? Obviously, that is going to be ignored. Obviously, that is not going to be something that the Russians are going to accept. And what you got now is Zelensky, the Europeans, and Donald Trump, or let's say the Europeans lumping in with Trump saying, hey, that's a great idea. Because what that means is that the original position out of Alaska of we don't need a ceasefire, we need a long-term solution to the conflict, has now been pushed back to, well, let's just have a ceasefire along the current lines, which, again, is never going to be accepted. Now, a conversation between Rubio and Lavrov took place. In that conversation, the reporting is that the conversation didn't necessarily go well, that Russia remained strident, which, why wouldn't they? They're obviously winning the war. So why on earth would they take a position of giving anything in this? And they stay with their same demands. No Ukraine in NATO. But in fact, I'll just pull it up. Right here, according to Reuters, Russia sent a confidential diplomatic memo. And by the way, this is DD Geopolitics, fantastic outlet. I still say it because it's still true, regardless of anything else. Russia reiterates peace terms to the United States in a private non-paper, basically sending a memo saying, look, these are our terms. Full stop. The stuff that you've been saying on air is nonsense and is a no. The notion that we are winning a war, that we are going to freeze that war and allow you to build up military armaments in Ukraine is a non-starter, and it's dumb. We did Minsk 1 and 2. We did the Istanbul agreements. We're not doing this again. The war doesn't stop until we win, A, or until there's a deal that we accept, meaning you accept our terms, B. Those are the only two scenarios we're willing to entertain. According to Reuters, Russia sent a confidential diplomatic memo to the United States over the weekend, restating its previous peace terms for Ukraine. Key demands: full Russian control over the entire Donbass region, rejecting Donald Trump's proposal to freeze the front lines where they currently stand. No NATO troops stationed in Ukraine under any circumstance of a peace framework. The White House has not commented, and Moscow's embassy in Washington has remained silent. Those terms aren't changing. Those terms aren't moving. Now, if you are Donald Trump and you have backtracked on this into this previous position of, well, let's just have a ceasefire. This is obviously a non-starter. So why are we going to Budapest if this is the conversation we're going to have when this is obviously a non-starter? I don't need to go to Budapest just to tell you no. Now, some analysts have come up with an assessment that this is not entirely the case. That what is being litigated in the open is not necessarily what is being litigated behind the scenes. That the deal that was initially on the table that Witkoff sent to Putin, that Putin apparently gave his commentary on, is still the thing that is being bantied about. And that the conversation that Donald Trump had with Zelensky, look, they're going to destroy Ukraine, is a legit conversation, which I actually believe was the conversation that they had. And that when Donald Trump came out and says, well, look, it's very complicated to trade land swaps. Okay, well, is that part of the actual conversation that Donald Trump is effectively outing without necessarily outing the fact that he's outing it? Meaning, it's part of the conversation that they had was, look, if the Ukrainian troops leave the Donbass, they call it a day, they leave, we occupy a territory, then we may be willing to stop fighting in other parts of the conflict line. That may be okay. Meaning, Russia is taking the position that they're taking because they're winning the war. Any country would do it. Any country would do it. If the United States and Europe had the capability to turn the tide of the war, they would. If the US had an industry base or industrial base that could pump out arms and send to Ukraine to win the conflict, or at the very least to beat back the Russians, they would. They don't have these things. Ukraine is A, running out of manpower, and B, the US doesn't have the industry and the armaments necessary to give Ukraine in order to do anything to change the context of this war, period. So what is Trump going to do? Now, in this case, Donald Trump is looking for leverage. Well, Donald Trump hasn't been able to find that leverage. So what is Trump going to do? What is the point of the Budapest summit? And what are you going there to talk about? And is what you're going there to talk about, let's say, terms that were associated under Alaska format? And if so, what are those terms? I have no clue. I have no clue. Now, the other part of this is Europe and Zelensky. Let's be very honest. If Zelensky signs a deal, Zelensky will be dead the very next day. Hell, within a few hours, he will be swinging from a flagpole. Zelensky knows it. So what can Zelensky do? Zelensky has no incentive at all to sign any kind of deal and to remain maximalist in his demands, which sucks for the Ukrainians because he's supposed to be representing Ukraine, not necessarily overtly caring about his own life in this context. From the standpoint of Europe, there are several different options for Europe. A, hubris, the idea of Europe losing a European war to Russia with the US backing is deeply, deeply humiliating. And it immediately raises the question of what was the point of NATO? If all of these countries putting all of their strength and energy together lose, not to mention their economies going up in smoke as they lose, meaning their economies are effectively smoking as they go about this, then what is the point of NATO? And how do you acknowledge that as former colonial masters of the world? That is a difficult thing to do. And since it's not European soldiers that are dying, these are Ukrainians that are dying, then what is your incentive to want to stop the war? If it's, well, look, if 100 more thousand Ukrainians die, what does it got to do with the UK? What does that have to do with France? What does that have to do with Germany? Nothing. So they have no incentive at all to effectively say, okay, well, let's come to some kind of terms to stop the war. The same thing, by the way, is true in the context of keeping the United States involved in Europe. They may believe that the United States under Donald Trump is skeptical of NATO. I personally don't buy this. I think for all intents and purposes, Donald Trump may want to pull the US out of Europe, but he damn sure wants to keep Europe pushing as a pressure valve on Russia, meaning it's almost like using the barbarians to fight your war. The Roman military doesn't have the capability of having a war in all of these fronts. So we need to bring in additional people from these barbarians in order to fight this war for us. In this case, Europeans will be the barbarians dealing with the Russians, with the United States being able to sell them a ton of weapons, which from the Trump point of view, is fantastic. We can have all of these companies that are working over there. We can keep selling them weapons. This is great for the US economy. That is the way Trump may look at it. And from the European standpoint, if they indeed want America to stay into the war, then they may have to increase the amount that NATO spends, which again is going to burn their own economies, considering their economies are already running hot. Meaning, and there's this other part where I also think, in this kind of cynical way, that Europeans may actually be trying to get themselves revved up for war, which is why they're like, well, we need to take the Russian money in order to keep Ukraine fighting for 3 more years. Personally, I don't think Ukraine has 3 more years in them. But hey, who knows, right? It's a sad state of affairs. What you have are countries that provoked a war by overthrowing a government in 2014, called it what did they call it? A revolution of dignity is what they called it. And none of them have been able to talk about it honestly. And in the context of not talking about it honestly, have created a huge amount of Russophobia within the context of their own countries, have spent ungodly sums of money on weapons that have just been fleeing Europe, meaning money fleeing Europe into the United States, has increased the costs that they have to pay for energy, which again is a huge amount of money fleeing Europe, not to mention they're still buying Russian oil, even though they're doing it at a markup, going through other sources. This is not a recipe for success. And yet Europe is fundamentally deluded in this mindset of, we're going to keep this war going, we're going to keep going, we're going to keep pushing, we're going to keep going. If we need to, we'll pay for the war if the US gets dodgy about it. Good luck with that. But that seems to be what they actually believe. The Trump administration, for them, it is impossible, I would go so far as to say, to accept Russian terms. I know a lot of people have this belief that the president doesn't care what people think. That's nonsense. I'm sorry, that's nonsense. If that's true, we shouldn't be here, right? We should be doing shows on Star Trek. Donald Trump seems to be uniquely bothered by this idea that he's a Russian stooge. And as evidence of that, when Donald Trump often gives speeches about this, what does he start with? Well, I put sanctions on Russia. I went after Putin on this and on that. He does that to inoculate himself for whatever he's going to say after the fact, even though what he's saying after the fact is just basic diplomacy. I'm saying that you don't say that unless you have a psychological scar, trauma that was created in the previous administration that Donald Trump inhabited, where you spent 4 years going after Donald Trump for being a Russian plant, Russian stooge, or got into office entirely because of Vladimir Putin. It bothers him. And because it bothers him, it makes it that much more difficult for Donald Trump to even approach a deal on fundamentally Russian terms, which is what the only thing that Russia is going to settle under. Even if there is leeway in this, meaning even if Putin says, okay, we have leeway in this sense of the term, it may be narrow, but even if there's leeway, even if we say Russian terms are maximalist, which I don't think they are, they're winning a war. But even if we say that, and that within the context of that, because under normal circumstances, when people give demands, they're giving a maximal demand with the idea that they can edge in, meaning we're going to start on the 100-yard line, and we may edge our way to the 80-yard line. They may do that. So you can make an argument that Putin being a politician, something like that may be taking place, in which case there may be some leeway in that can be discussed, some leeway, some chips that can be thrown off in order to actually get a deal. But then you're also stuck with this issue of how do you trust the United States on anything? You've had Minsk 1 and 2. You've had the Istanbul agreements. The United States, if you're looking at beyond the Russia conflict, them getting into negotiations with Iran and then attacking Iran in the middle of those negotiations. You have this fake deal in Gaza that everybody's pretending is actually a ceasefire when Israel hasn't necessarily abided by it from within 24 hours. How do you look at that and look at the country that does those things and say, We can make a deal with those guys. How do you do that? More to the point, how do you make a deal and maintain the banderites that are in office currently? You can maybe come to an assessment that the moment that you make the deal, that the government is going to collapse. Maybe. Maybe not. But I guess my thing is, how does Russia, in this case, make a deal? Now, I've always made the argument to you that from my point of view, Putin is chasing safety. That the entire point of the war, ironically, is chasing safety. And him being a diplomat, if the deal is on the table that these guys are able to verify, he may accept it to the chagrin of a lot of people who do Russian analysis, because from my point of view, how do you trust the United States? How do you do it? What deal is the US going to come to with the Russians where the United States gives up this idea of primacy or gives up this idea of overextending Russia? How do you do it? Whatever rump state that's left over in Ukraine, how do you prevent them from filling that rump state with weapons? Or for that matter, how do you prevent France or the UK or somebody else from doing it? How do you prevent Ukraine from trying to rejoin NATO at some other point? It was already in their constitution that they were supposed to be neutral. They just got rid of it. You don't want to do this again in 5 or 10 years, right? So how do you make any kind of deal without effectively hobbling Ukraine and eliminating the government that's in power? I don't have an answer for that, short of taking all of Ukraine, which I honestly don't believe they really want to do. I think Putin, after taking the Donbass, is probably going to come up again and say, hey, are you finished? Are you finished? Like Captain America, I can do this all day. You guys are collapsing. Are we done? I don't see Europe saying yes to that, meaning we're done, yes. I don't see them saying that, since, again, these aren't Europeans that are dying, these are Ukrainians that are dying. And I'm making a distinction between the two, yes. Because I'm trying to say that it's the Ukrainians that are out there getting killed and massacred and slaughtered, not French, not Germans, not Italians, not etc. And without the feedback mechanism, what is the hedge in this? Sure, we're going to look bad when this effectively falls apart. And yeah, there's going to be blame that's going to go around, but it's better for that blame to take place in a year or two as opposed to that blame taking place now. I think what Trump doesn't quite get, and obviously there's a few things that he doesn't quite get, but I don't think he gets that either way, when this collapses, he will be blamed. If the Ukrainian military collapses, Trump will be blamed. Trump walks, Trump will be blamed. In both situations, he will be blamed. The only way out is to make a deal, put a huge amount of lipstick on that pig, put a huge amount of powder and put a wig on it, and walk out and say, I saved Ukraine. Make that his argument. Because otherwise, the Russians are not going to stop. And all things being equal, many of these people don't necessarily want to come to terms. But Russia will keep going. For their point of view, it is existential, which compels action. There is no bluff. There is nothing that the U.S. can do. They will keep going. My guest is here. I want to go to my guests. I am joined with the man, the legend, Garland Nixon. How you doing, man? You doing okay this morning?
Great. A little groggy.
Which is a little groggy.
Let's see. Groggy. My back's killing me. My sciatica's acting up. Other than that, I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, you told me your back was hurting. I'm sorry to hear that. I wasn't sure because last time you were here, I asked you about the show, and you was like, "Yeah, I haven't been doing them consistently." Is it because of the back pain? Is it?
That's a big part of it. Yeah, it's one of these things. It flares up every so often. Sometimes worse than others, but it is what it is.
I'm sorry to hear that. You're not the only one. That another one of my guests has just had surgery on his back.
Oh.
And yeah, he was in a lot of pain also. So no, man, I'm sorry to hear that. Garland Nixon, political analyst. He runs the Garland Nixon show on YouTube. He is a fantastic analyst. Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry about the back pain. That sucks.
Oh, well, thanks a lot.
You did a video, and in that video, you pointed out, and I guess there were two things. One had to do with the Trump-Putin peace quarter of peace. where they were talking about drilling basically a tunnel to Russia to connect the United States and Russia to Alaska.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this was something that Caleb Maupin often talks about too, this idea of this kind of representation of a connection between the United States and Russia. Do you see that taking place? I mean, like, I feel like these are the oligarchs trying to sway the political institutions in the United States. I mean, they even mentioned Elon Musk. I mean, we're talking, this is, what is his name? Dmitry Kirillov, I believe. And he even mentioned Musk saying, hey, we can do this cheaper. Even Elon Musk gets involved. It feels like the oligarchs are trying to sway the political branch. It's like, hey, Trump likes money. Let's wave some money in his face. But this, on some level, and let me ask you, does this ignore the political realities or geopolitical realities? Making a buck is one thing. Geopolitics and the way that, let's say, many of these war hawks think about the stuff is another. Give me your thoughts.
Well, one thing, I think it's representation of the political fight between various factions of the ruling elite and factions of the foreign policy blob. Whereas, there are the factions that are just simply, let's dominate and we got to take Russia out and take China out and take everybody out. I think there's another faction that would prefer to do things another way, that want economic domination. But I think they see it through, let's make a deal with Russia and we'll make money off of that and they'll make some deals. Keep in mind, Musk and his people are already making a fortune off of China. I think it was the chief of NVIDIA or somewhere the other day, the chief of one of these big chip companies saying, hey, what they're doing with China is a problem because they've got such a big market. And, we went from, part of that market to zero, and that's a problem for us. So you have people that are already have integrated their business model into the China, the business model that includes China. They're doing well off of it, and they see the future, I think wisely so, as, hey, man, look, instead of fighting China, we're already making money working with China. Let's work with China and make money. They look at Russia. They say there's not lots of natural resources. There's lots of business opportunities there. Let's work with them and make money. So I think that's the factions, more of a faction that says, hey, it's business. Let's see how we can make money versus the old school faction that says, well, yeah, we want to make money, but we're going to take it. We'll make money by overthrowing their governments and stealing everything they got. Forget that business about doing that, peaceful integration of economic, of our economic opportunities. So I think that's what we're seeing, a fight between factions of the ruling elite. I'd personally like to see it. I think symbolically it's powerful. And I think if you create a dynamic where, hey, at some point you can build railroads there. And now, I mean, you have some kind of a land bridge between Eurasia and the, Western Hemisphere. I think that could be tremendous opportunities for business. Business-wise, I think it would be very smart. I'd love to see it. Symbolic-wise, from the perspective of symbolism and war, I think it would be really good for that. But the neocons, as Alexander Mercouris says, when it comes to the arguments and the fights in Washington, it seems that the neocons always win.
Yeah, it's wild, right? I mean, oftentimes when we think of politics, we think in a sense of money is the thing that moves it. Like this kind of imperialistic impulse is driven by this need to conquer and take resources. And you would think that oligarchs who are pushing these policies, that this is the thing that is pushing the political space. And I think for me, it was always like, let's say Joe Biden, for example. Joe Biden's brain was mush when he was in office. But Joe Biden, if you woke him up at 3 a.m, would still say, Putin needs to be out of office. We got to push, we got to back NATO. We got to do this stuff. Meaning he had a formed political ideology that exceeded and went beyond, let's say, economic interests per se. Meaning they might have dovetailed, but all things being equal, Joe Biden was a war hawk and he wanted to go in a direction. It is weird when you see these oligarchs coming out of either Russia or the US, and their influence is minor in comparison to the war. And I think that's what the entire point of Kirillov was, where his thing was like, let's make deals. We can, Russia has resources. Hey, what about Exxon? What about this? What about that? And of course, Donald Trump might have been interested in those things in a vacuum, but all things being equal, it seemed that Trump is effectively trapped by hegemony in the way that the U.S. operates.
Well, let me read, if Tony Blinken's book here, Ally versus Ally, I'll just read a couple of sentences from it.
You bought that book.
Yes, I did.
You put money in Blinken's pocket.
I certainly did. I did because I want to know what these guys are thinking, right?
Yeah.
And it's perfect for this conversation because what he talks about in this book is exactly what you're saying. People who see geopolitics as a way to make money and people who just see it as we don't care about if we lose money, right? Who cares if we lose everything? As long as we geostrategic purpose, that's it. Who cares if we all go broke? As long as we're a little less broke than the Russians and the Chinese, So he says, for a number of this is Blinken, and they were talking about, what he was talking about is the oil pipelines. They were unhappy with these Siberian pipelines going into Europe, and Europe was doing well because they were getting cheap oil. And here's what he says. For a number of influential policymakers, the time seemed opportune to engage the Soviet Union in a round of economic warfare. You notice he uses that word, right?
Uh-huh.
Listen to this. Regardless of the price that might have to be paid by the economies of Western Europe and the American business community, which would be excluded from the Soviet bloc markets. So he's saying then, and he had basically said he's one of those influential policymakers. So regardless of the price, so they're saying, oh man, this would be a great time to go after Russia with economic warfare. Who cares about the price it's going to cost for American and European businesses? But keep in mind something. If you say we're going to do this, even though, it just smashes the American and European businesses, that means the people who work for those businesses, which are all of us out there, are going to suffer too. Now, it was Tony Blinken saying that. And that's exactly what they did when Tony Blinken came to office with Joe Biden in 2020. The second he got in office is in 2020. Within 2 years, they blew up Nord Stream pipeline. And exactly what he said, they saw it as the perfect opportunity to engage Russia in what they engage them in, economic warfare, regardless of the price that it had for Europe and business. When he got in office, within 2 years, they did exactly what he said. He wrote this in the mid-1980s, as soon as he got in office.
Wow.
Let's take it out. So it's interesting. All you got to read is what this guy did in the 1980s. That book, it's like a manifesto for a serial killer, which is exactly what Tony Blinken is, I might add, a serial killer.
A manifesto to a serial killer. Basically, a psychopath writes a book. That is exactly what's happening, though, right? If you look at Germany's economy is trash right now. The number of jobs that they're losing, Lufthansa taking a hit, the auto industry taking a hit, the cars are not competitive. Like all of this stuff is happening at once, in addition to this huge, let's say, taxation burden that are effectively on the Germans. And then you look at what's happening in France, you look at what's happening in the UK, all of these countries are economic damage. They didn't care. It's almost as if they had this mythical belief that Europe was a mythical thing and that it ran just on magic and buttercups. And then the moment that the Russian oil went away, it was like, oh my God, we're running on Russian oil. It's like we thought we were just a magical garden. Not so much. That is exactly what took place. They didn't care about how this was going to hit the various economies. They did this for geopolitical reasons. And I think this is why the influence of people who are trying to make money matters less in this case. God, that fantastic reading, Garland.
His exactly words. Regardless of the price that might have to be paid by the economies. He didn't say business, by the economies of Western Europe and the American business community. The economies. He said, we will wipe their economies out. Long as it's time, we can engage. And when he say engage the Soviet Union in economic warfare,
this is not even
that's what they're doing.
This is
and
Russia.
They don't care. And they're doing the same thing with China. Good, let's go after China. Well, it's obvious it's going to wipe out our economy. But the neocons, what do they care? Who cares? What's going to wipe out our economy? But who cares? Regardless of the price, it's going to have to be paid. It's sick.
You had this other thing where you're pointing out defanging the U.S.
Yes.
And I guess this is why it needs to be defanged. Stuff like this. And those idiots in Europe are effectively going along with this. They just stole a Chinese company in the Netherlands. I mean, God, they must have been high if they thought that China was just going to stand by, like, oh golly gee, they took our company.
If I was China,
explain that, the defending thing. Give me your thoughts.
well, here's what I'm saying. Okay. And I put it simple. I mean, if Jamal said, Garland, can you give me a ride to the store? Why? So I can buy a gun. What are you going to do with that gun? I'm going to shoot you. No. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll shoot your best friend. Why? Because he's going to help you. If when I do try to shoot you, which I'm going to do next. Well, no, I'm not going to give you a gun. It's only logical, right?
Yeah,
literally, right. When you say to China, I need rare earth minerals. What for? Because I'm building missiles. What are you going to do with the missiles I'm shooting them at you? Yeah, I mean, come on, we got to go to war within 2028. You're rising too fast. We want to dominate the world, the region, everywhere. We got to build lots of weapons so we can attack you. I'm saying if I'm China, they'd have to be out of their minds. I'm saying no. So my position is, I'm guessing, maybe I'm wrong, or I'm just saying if I were the Chinese leadership, this business about rare earth minerals, I would simply say, you guys are lunatics. You're threatening me, so I can never sell you rare earth minerals, ever. Not going to happen. Develop your own. And not only that, look, you're running around committing genocide. You're threatening to attack Venezuela, who's a friend of mine. You're threatening to attack Iran, who is a friend of mine. And we both know the reason you want to attack them is so you can get some level of domination, get some finances, get yourself together, and then attack me. You made it clear that your ultimate plan is to destroy me. I got to stop you. And you want to destroy everybody else. No. And if the U.S. came back to bargain, if I'm China, there's no bargain to be made. That day is gone. Nope. You're going to run out of rare earth minerals and you will not be able to build anything militarily. And that exactly is why I'm not selling to you. That's my ultimate plan. I will be smiling when you finally say, we can't build any more weapons. And I'll say, my good deeds have been done. Now the world can move on. Sans neocon lunatics.
It's beyond the rare earth. I mean, it's beyond the military equipment. That's one part of it. I mean, there was a paper, I think it was like 75% of the U.S. military comes from either direct Chinese products or indirect Chinese products. That's astonishing. And you're right? It's like, dude, I'm not going to give you a ride to go to the gun store to shoot me in the face. Why would I do that? And then U.S. is like, this is outrageous. It's like, what do you mean it's outrageous? You're openly threatening. People may forget this, but the U.S. reached out to the Philippines. They reached out to Australia. I believe it was Japan. Say, hey, are you guys ready to fight and die for us?
Yeah.
To go after China. So this is not hypothetical, right? This is like a clear and present pivot that the United States has been wanting to make for decades, even going back to Obama era, that they've just been stuck in Ukraine because they couldn't get their war straight or sequence their war straight. So no, you're absolutely right. But this is AI. This is laptops, electronics. I mean, it's just not military. It goes down the line of stuff. Yeah, that they got us by the balls, as Joe would say. It's like they got us by the balls on this. I mean, do you think there's a deal that can be reached? Or do you think, well, no, they're not going to make a deal with us in these terms? I mean, all things being equal, they're still going to maintain these constraints on the way rare earths are being, let's say, litigated.
If I were China, I can't say for sure, I wouldn't make a deal. Would you? You know what I mean? But man, they're screaming. All someone would have to do right now, if anybody doesn't believe me, go do any kind of internet searches. Not you could search on Google, you can search on Brave search on 3 or 4 and search United States war with China, U.S. coming war with China. Go just look and through the New York Times and Washington Post and search the word China. You'll find all of these things about our missiles are superior and how we could fight them and what we need to do. And all these things making it clear that the ruling elite want war with China. If I'm China, I just say, well, you may be able to have a war with me, but I'm not going to make it easy for you. I'm going to make it as difficult as possible. And if you say, well, you're going to lose a lot more money, I'd say I'd lose a lot more money in a war. So if I got to say I'm going to lose money, it's going to hurt my economy. I think a war with the United States would hurt my economy a whole lot more. Weighing the two, I think it's a lot cheaper for me to, do everything I can to inhibit your ability to go to war with me, which you can't.
Right.
Without these rare earth minerals, you can't. So if I do this, you in all likelihood can't. That's the game plan. Your move. Do whatever you're going to do. But the answer is no.
it also hits Trump's ability to this kind of reshoring heavy industry to the States, this maximalist push for AI. It hits all of it. It's like it hits, like it is such a weak point in the way our economy effectively runs that China has found. It just, the pressure on that particular weak point. No, I agree with you. I don't blame him. How can you blame him? Right?
And guess what? Doesn't the U.S. use any means that it can to attack China right now?
Yes.
Any means possible? We know for a fact that there's been projects on the Belt and Road that have been attacked by, literally bombed and stuff like that in Pakistan. Everybody knows the CIA is behind that. So you're literally overthrowing countries on their border. You're trying to overthrow their allies and cut them off. You're doing all kinds of things. And if the U.S. had this hanging over China's head, we cut it off immediately and never sell them anything. If we've used every possible way we can to destroy China, any option that we have to hurt China economically, we use. And recently we made a deal and said, okay, right now there's a moratorium on doing bad things against each other. We're working on a deal. We're not going to do anything to hurt you. You're not going to do anything to hurt us. And the China agreed, fair enough. Within days, we're taking more actions to hurt them. We violated it ourselves. If I'm China, I'd say fair enough. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
It's China. What I think it is, though, is China showing the world we are a peer competitor, period. None of this nonsense about you being, because that's exactly what they did. China and the United States agreed the tariff war, let's say, it became a ceasefire. And the U.S. started to escalate and started to do stuff like the chips thing, for example. The U.S. believed that it had this ability to damage China by using microchips and these kind of like NVIDIA chips and everything else. What did China do? China spun up their own industry in those chips, at which point, which is to your point, if the U.S. had the capability of doing it, they would have done it. And so the idea that the U.S. is screaming that China is going to war with the world. No, they're not. It's about you. Don't externalize this. This is about you. No, you're absolutely right. You're 1,000% correct. I don't know if they're going to come to a deal. I don't even know what the deal will look like, especially if ultimately the U.S. goal of primacy remains. Why do you think they're willing to go to a war that they're obviously going to lose? There's no way that the U.S. is going to beat China in a conventional war, which means it would eventually go nuclear. We are lost. All of these, let's say, military games that we've effectively ran in this case, we've lost every last one of them. And yet they're still edging for it. Is it that they want the war or they want the appearance of war? Because even the appearance of war maximizes profit in regards to the weapons that are being made.
I think one of the things we're looking at as the empire falls apart is the actions are not rational anymore. We are like looking at it saying, hey, I'll give you an example. Remember the Will Smith thing where he smacked Chris Rock? And then afterwards he says, oh, I lost it. I was protecting my wife. And, kind of like he just went out of his head and went berserk protecting his wife and he lost it. Right. And I'm like, if that was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson you slapped, I believe you lost it. If you slapped somebody that was twice your size that would pulverize you immediately afterwards, I'd say, yeah, you lost it. You really lost control because, you did something knowing that you had a complete disregard for your own health and welfare. So I'd say, yeah, you kind of went crazy. I believe him. But if you smack some guy half your size, you didn't lose it. You acted because you knew he couldn't hurt you. It was a very rational decision. I'll smack him. I'll show off. He can't do anything to hurt me. Right. The same with the U.S. That's why I say Uncle Sam and its allies are irrational. Yeah. So we're looking at it saying, why would they do this? They can't possibly win because we're rational actors. Look what they're doing in Russia. Yes, we've got to get we need to get a ceasefire. You and I know there ain't going to be no ceasefire, but they can't act in a rational manner. We need Russia to do this. I saw Glenn Deason had a woman who was from one of these think tanks who tried to give the appearance of being rational. But when you listen to her discussion about, she somewhat acknowledged that it was existential to Russia, but still kind of acted as though they could get a deal with Russia that wouldn't recognize the existential nature of this to Russia. Yeah, but we can do this and we have to do this and then we'll have this kind of leverage. You got no leverage with Russia. None. Yeah. they're going to win the war because they lost 27 million people, the Nazis last time. They ain't losing 27 million this time. There's nothing you can do to get a deal with them. They'll win this war. I mean, they'll make a deal, but it's going to be so lopsided, it'll effectively be a signature of surrender. And I don't blame them. They have no choice. That's what we do if they came to our border. Any superpower would do that. So even a woman who pretended to be rational, she was from the military-industrial complex and looked like she really, I think people should watch that with Lynn Deason. I think that she was even kind of getting where you need to be to understand the realities of this, but she still wasn't there. Because
I don't think they can come to that. Like,
exactly.
It seems to be very difficult to drag that horse to water. It just seems to be very difficult. Like, they can't. I remember I had this back and forth with this guy who was from NATO. Like, he was like full blown NATO is fantastic. We're just a peaceful organization. We just have lilies and those type of things. And I remember pointing out to him, like, dude, you've expanded to the Russian border. Like, you're literally surrounding the country. He says, well, Russia's a big country. You can't surround it. Dude, okay. But you have created a situation where you have circled it with military. What do you expect them to do? At which point his response was like, well, that's a good point. It's like, no shit, it's a good point. Like it's not Russia that is expanding to Pittsburgh, right? This is you expanding to their border, overthrow Ukraine, and call it a revolution. And what do you expect them to do as this, this force that is built to go after the Soviet Union and the remaining beating heart of the Soviet Union being Russia? You're expanding to their, why do you expect them to be okay with that? But that's not the honest way that they engage it. Ukraine is an independent country. Ukraine can do whatever it wants. If Ukraine wants to join NATO, Russia shouldn't have anything to do with it. I mean, it's insane the way they talk about this stuff. They don't seem to get that this is existential. And because it's existential, everything is on the table. They don't quite get that. And I don't even know if Trump gets that. Give me your thing on this Budapest. For one, do you think the meeting is going to take place? And B, what do you think the point of this meeting is if they can't come to that acknowledgement?
I hear that it's on, it's off, it's off, it's on. I think the Budapest, I think the true purpose was Trump was smushed into a corner, right, with the tomahawks, and he wiggled out of the corner using. But that's the same thing that happened before. Remember, it was like, yes, Trump's got to do these massive sanctions, bone-crushing sanctions by Thursday if he doesn't come up with a deal with Putin. And like Wednesday, he's like, we're having a meeting with Putin. And they're like, crap, you wiggled out of it again. And what happens? All right, Trump, it's Tomahawks Friday, Thursday. We're having a meeting with Putin. Crap, not that again. So we see a very clear pattern that when they push Trump all the way into a corner, I've always said this, you can't corner Trump because he doesn't
cornered himself. I mean, he's who said this stuff. I'm going to do bone crushing sanctions.
Yeah. But that's Trump. Yeah, I mean, but he will promise anything. If you haven't noticed his political career, Trump will promise anything and not deliver. He does the same thing that he does. That's a pattern for Trump. In the same way that he tells his voters, I'll do this, this, this. And when he gets in office, who cares about any of that? I ain't doing it, right? He does the same thing with the neocons. So they're like, okay, we got to go get Russia. We got to do this. He's like, yeah, sure. Great idea. I'll do it. And he looks and he goes, all right, I got 3 weeks to wiggle out of it. Guys, don't forget. Hey, great idea. Yeah, let's get Russia. All right. Crap, 2 weeks to wiggle out of it. What am I going to do? Then he gets down to the last minute. Guys, how can I wiggle? We'll do the old meeting with Putin. Oh, great. All right. We'll do it tomorrow. Okay, Trump, Tomahawks, meeting with Putin. Crap. So he's played that. I don't know if he can do it a third time. I think he's going to have come up with something again. But it was the meeting with Putin was an off ramp. It was wiggling out of a corner. The Russians know what he's doing, and they played along with it. I want to meet with Putin. And the Russians are like, sure, sounds like a great idea. Let's get it set up. And if you say it's going to be in Europe, it's really a distraction because the Europeans are like, oh, no, not in Europe. We've got to stop it. It's going to be in Europe. And Trump's like, worked again, didn't it? Yeah, guys, go ahead and keep fighting that. And now the struggle is not, why didn't you give them the tomahawks? The struggle is, why are you going to do it in Europe? And that's the conversation. You sucked all of the air out of the room that was being talked about tomahawks. And now that it's being talked about the meeting with Putin, where it's going to be, why it shouldn't be there. That's the game Trump plays. It's a rhetorical game. It is a duck and dodge and wiggly game. But and even the woman from this And she was like from the Center for Strategic Studies, one of these terrible, even she said Tomahawks was never on the table.
Yeah, it was a bluff.
She said, we talked to the people in Kiev, and this is what she said, and they wanted Tomahawks. They really thought Tomahawks was on the table. Tomahawks were never on the table. Ray McGovern was right. And even the people over at the Center for the Evil Doings, or whatever the hell it's called, knew Tomahawks were never on the table.
Yeah, my original take was it was a bluff. I didn't even cover it.
Right.
I thought it was a bluff. And then the closer we got to it, I'm like, maybe he is going to give them. I mean, I was looking at the Russian response. The Russian response was so muted that I was like, okay, well, if that's going to be the Russian response, they may beat the hell out of Ukraine, but that doesn't fall back on us in any real sense. Maybe they do give them. No, it ended up being just a bluff. And I agree with you. This was Trump's off-ramp, just like it was the first time around. I mean, I don't know how often he could do this. And also calling it a way to manage the neocons implies that Donald Trump has an agenda beyond, how can I say this? Let me ask you this. Do you okay, there are two questions. One has to do with it being in Budapest and Orban. Obviously, Orban has been trying to end this war for a while. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that Budapest comes up, considering Orban is like, this war needs to end, Europe is trying to take us to war, etc. So from this perspective of Trump, or from the perspective of Putin, okay, this is a favorable venue in the context of Orban, despite the fact that it's in Europe. The other part to this is, do you think that Trump does have a direction that he's trying to go? Because for me, it's hard for me to conceive of an American president accepting a surrender in this way. But do you think if he's just managing the neocons and the things that he's saying about bone-crushing sanctions or tomahawks, that ultimately, okay, I'm lying to everybody in the room, but I do have a destination that I'm trying to get to?
I do think Trump does have an idea of the way he wants things to be and, outcomes, but I think he's forced to manage the neocons because they're so relentless. They're coming at you every day. And Trump is forced to manage them. I think Trump foolishly wants to rob Venezuela of all of their oil. So, Trump has a lot of neocon and he has a lot of imperialist in him. It's not like he's some kind of a peacenik or something like that. He is the reincarnation of Gandhi or something. Trump ain't that. He would be first absolutely happy to attack Venezuela and steal everything that isn't nailed down. So I think Donald Trump sees Venezuela as a way out economically. They got all of this oil. We could get the oil. We could sell the oil. And of course, the finance capital could come in and say, oh boy, we have access to all of this oil. We can leverage that for all kind of loans and things like that. We can use that as collateral. So all of that, trillions of dollars of oil in Venezuela, were Trump able to steal that, could save the U.S. from some of the economic issues coming up over the next year. And I think that the neocons' obsession with Russia, first and foremost, and with China, I put it like this. I think Trump's the kind of guy like a Chris Rock. He wants to slap the guy that's half his size, but he doesn't really want to fight the big guy that's his size or bigger that can fight back. I believe that about Trump. He'd beat up on all the little countries that he could. He's just a different kind of neocon. He doesn't want to engage with the big guys. He wants to beat up all the little guys and steal all their stuff. Both evil, but just
so
a different.
Think he is looking for off-ramp, that he is looking for a way out this war.
Yeah, I think he is. I think Trump's more worried about financial. I think if Trump had his way, he'd get the hell out and walk away tomorrow. He don't give a crap about, oh yeah, let's take out Russia and then China. And then he'd go about, taking out Venezuela and who knows who else, right? But the neocons know it too. And I think they're just going to relentlessly try to fight him for 4 straight years until they can hopefully get another one of their guys in and go back to their, evil deeds. I think that's part of I think they probably look at it and they said, well, we were able to hold them off for 4 years before. Then we got Biden in and we were able to go full neocon. So I guess we'll have to hold him off for 4 years and then get whoever hopefully they want in and do the same thing again. But I think there's a whole lot of bumps in the road between then and now. And as we said earlier, I think China has put a sinkhole in the road by saying no rare earth metals for you, pal.
Yeah, it limits the capability of the U.S. military to produce that stuff. I mean, it was already let's say, slow introduction of, this is not the industrial base of the 1940s, right? This is not, the Second World War industrial base in regards to the United States. We sold a lot of stuff off, but it makes it even harder with the whole rare earths thing into play of like, okay, how do you continuously build these missiles? How do you build these weapon systems? If indeed you don't have access in the way that you need them. No, Garland, fantastic point, man.
Yeah.
Garland, thank you for this, man. You fantastic. Always appreciate talking to you. I am sorry you're in pain.
No, well, that's such is life, that is life.
Such is life. Garland
Hopefully it'll go away sometime soon, but I can't be guaranteed the way things are going.
Yeah, political analyst, radio host, host of the Garland Nixon show on YouTube. Garland, when is your next show? Just so the audience would know.
I'll do something sometime today. Sometime, maybe probably this afternoon, some point. I got a doctor's appointment and all that stuff. And then hopefully when I get back, then I'll limp back over to the TV.
Oh, that's
I'll limp back over to the
computer. Man, you be safe.
All righty.
Do well. Have a good one. Thank you. All right, Garland, love that guy. Garland was the one that got me on the radio. He would have my appreciation forever for that. Let me bring in my other two guests. We are joined with Lawrence Wilkerson, or I should say Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, and Chief Dennis Fritz. Let's go with Fritz first. Chief Fritz is retired Command Chief Master Sergeant of the United States Air Force. He is former director of the Eisenhower Media Network with the mission to promote peace and diplomacy over war. While on active duty, he served as the principal senior advisor to 4-star commanders at Pacific Air Forces and Air Force Space Command. He also held the additional duty as senior enlisted advisor to the commander of North America Aerospace Defense Command. And he is also author of the book, Deadly Betrayal, The Truth About Why the United States Invaded Iraq. I've been hearing fantastic things about that book. Even one of my guests was raving about it. We also have Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He is the former distinguished visiting professor of the government and public policy at College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He also taught 6 years in the University Honors Program at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He is also probably best known as retired United States Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff to United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. You guys doing okay today?
Good to be with you, Jamal.
Doing well.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us again.
Excellent. So I want to hit two subjects. One, I want to hit, let's say, the Gaza quote-unquote ceasefire, as it's called. And the other one, I want to hit what's taking place currently in Ukraine. And I want to start with the Gaza one first. Witkoff made the point of saying that he was in contact with the CIA 3 times a day. Now, this is fascinating because Witkoff is not really part of the government, but whatever. Let's go with it, right? And that he was apparently not aware that Hamas had been willing to make a deal for like 2 years. What is happening with this? I mean, A, do you believe Witkoff when he's saying this? And B, how does the CIA not know that Hamas was open for a deal for like within several months of this conflict? And well, I'll start with you, Colonel Wilkerson. I think I started with Command Chief Fritz last time. Let me know what your thoughts are on this.
Well, Jamal, when I listened and watched that video, which is now, I understand, had been pulled back, I had one of 2 conclusions to come to. Either, and this is an easy one to come to, we're dealing with a group of clowns who don't know what's going on and who are completely out of contact with reality, but often mend their words to portray otherwise. Or 2, they're complicit with a gargantuan lie crafted by Bibi Netanyahu, but I must come to a swift conclusion agreed in by Donald Trump. And maybe it's the other way around. A lie constructed by Donald Trump and Steve Miller and other people around him and accepted by Netanyahu for the temporary present. Either way, it's not a good sign. And I don't have anything to say about a civilian, not even a part of the government, meeting 3 times or whatever with the CIA or getting information from them. After all, the CIA briefs the heads of the telecommunications networks and other important corporations in America all the time, and have been doing that quite a long time, but amplified it majorly after 9/11, when we brought many of these people like AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and others into the government's councils so that they could help us track terrorists. And of course, they came in very willingly because they began to build up data banks on Americans across the country that were very helpful to them for commercial reasons. So this is a complicity that's been going on for a very long time.
The only thing I can say to this is that I got one worse than that. I mean, when you look at Kushner, who I consider just a civilian and playing a major role in our so-called foreign policy, that is very disturbing to me, especially knowing that, if I remember right, took $2 billion from the Saudis. And for him to be right in the middle, that's more alarming to me than anything. But regarding, Hamas wanting to come to the table, 2 years ago, I don't know, but I believe that. I'm not surprised that CIA probably would know that and keep it from, anyone, to include Trump. So that is not surprising to me. I've seen it happen before, during the second Iraq war, where, the CIA, DIA, the Department of Defense intelligence arm, we're all keeping information from one another. And so, that's why I think the DNI was created, to try to bring all that information together. But I think, that our intelligence still keep, especially the different agencies, still keep information away from one another. So I'm not surprised. I think you're on mute, Jamal. I can't hear you.
Apologies. It's raining here, and I'm just trying to make sure that it didn't translate through. Is this a real deal? Is this quote unquote ceasefire an actual ceasefire?
No, it's not. It never has been. Bibi Netanyahu never met a ceasefire he intended to keep, whether it was with Lebanon, Gaza, West Bank, anywhere. He's never kept a ceasefire. He doesn't have it in his disposition to keep a ceasefire. What he does is he uses ceasefires to not only fool those who might have thought they orchestrated the ceasefire, like Witkoff and Kushner, and maybe even President Trump. At the same time, he's deepening his killing of his opponents, in this case, Palestinians all over the place, West Bank or whatever. I just watched a video of a reporter, a white man, accompanying some browner people, namely Palestinians, in the West Bank, accosted by settlers and an IDF Army Jeep, which he approached with tender care. And they had their guns on him the whole time, and asked for help to help the Palestinians, their journalists too, along with him, in their car to turn around and get out of the area. Well, the Jeep hastened away quickly and left him to the proud disposition of the settlers. This is the way Bibi Netanyahu's people operate all the time. And with regard to this ceasefire, he's now using that as an opportunity to continue to smash the Palestinians everywhere he can, kill them or capture them. And he's using some other people within the strip, if you will, that are placed there with Israeli help to act as if they are being oppressed by Hamas and that they have to kill Hamas too. So he's got ancillaries operating in the area now. No doubt he prepared well ahead of time while Donald was contemplating Kushner and Witkoff and their deal, and Vance contemplating his trip to the region, to be surprised by the fact that even he has indicated Netanyahu is not keeping one iota of this ceasefire. Meanwhile, he's building up his ability and rest in recouping that portion of the IDF that was really being hard pressed in Gaza City. And in some ways, had he continued, it was going to be defeated majorly. He's resting and recuperating them so that he can have all the assets he needs when he wants to go full bore as he opens a new theater of war with Iran, which is now, I think, utterly inevitable. It might be delayed somewhat because he's had to take into consideration some new intelligence about Iran's capacity to do major damage to him. So he's trying to deal with that right now. But this is all going to spread. It's all going to become a much deeper, wider conflict. And Donald Trump's going to have a choice. And Bibi's going to give him no choice. Donald Trump is going to have to bail Bibi out when he gets in existential trouble with Iran. That's the whole plan.
But Donald Trump has to know this. I mean, like, what I mean by that is within a day of this quote unquote ceasefire, with all the pomp and circumstance and everything else that went along with it, Israel started killing Gazans again. And they tried to use this pretext of a bomb that was put off, when really it wasn't a bomb. The U.S. knew it wasn't a bomb. The U.S. apparently, Donald Trump contacted Netanyahu, was like, hey, cut this out. But again, the killing has continued. So this was the same situation that we were in with Joe Biden, where anything that takes place that Israel does, the U.S. turns around and says, that damn Hamas, and Hamas better not do X or Y, meaning they would never acknowledge that it was Israel that is violating the ceasefire. So if you're not acknowledging it, doesn't that by definition means that you're perfectly aware of what is taking place? Meaning this is not Netanyahu playing Trump. This is Trump being perfectly in on it.
Yeah. Hey, Jamal, let me just say this. We keep using the term ceasefire. Well, let's be quite frank. There's been no ceasefire.
Right.
You know, we keep saying a ceasefire. The day after, you know, there was no ceasefire. There's never planned to be a ceasefire from the Israelis or Bibi Netanyahu's standpoint of view. And, you know, I always tell folks, just use your own critical thinking. You know, okay, you know, it said Hamas was willing to make a deal 2 years ago. Well, I want you to think about this. The only leverage that Hamas had was those 20 live prisoners. You know, I'm tired of us saying, you know, hostages, and then we tell the Palestinians they're prisoners. You know, those 20 prisoners, and I guess I better be kind because there were, you know, women and children, so we will say hostages, I guess. But you know,
in the military.
Well, good point. Good point. But let me just say this. I'm sorry. Say it again.
No, I was just pointing it out. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yeah. And so, one, there's not been a ceasefire, so we probably just need to stop saying that. Bibi has always had the plan. You know, he was going to destroy, you know, Gaza. You know, one key word Larry was kept saying. He's saying Bibi Netanyahu was going to kill Palestinians. Never saying Hamas. It's about Palestinians. It's not about Hamas. Hamas is just the boogeyman word, an organization they use to go ahead and surely destroy Hamas. There's never been a ceasefire. And when I was alluding about critical thinking, just think about this. The only leverage that Hamas had was the 20 living hostages. Okay? Now, with that said, they gave up those 20 living hostages. And, oh, by the way, the ones that were dead that they could possibly find, they gave them up. Now the pressure's on. Oh, where are the others? Well, listen, think about all that rubble that Israel caused that probably caused some of the death of some of the hostages. But yet we keep pointing the finger at who? Hamas. Hamas gave us the biggest leverage they had to get this so-called ceasefire. What has Israel did but continue to bomb and kill Palestinians? Not Hamas, but Palestinians.
And Jamal, let's just get this straight about hostages and POWs, or whatever term you want to use. We came up with the wonderful concept of illegal combatants after 9/11.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
But here's the truth. Israel has had thousands of hostages from Palestinians in its draconian prisons, some of which would be absolutely, if they were revealed as to what happens there to the American people, they'd be revolted by it, I'm sure. So let's just balance the sheet here. Israel has thousands of Palestinian hostages being held under horrible conditions, and some of them, like Barghouti, for years, decades. So let's balance the scales here. Let's talk about what people really are in this conflict. And while I'm doing it, let's just point out once again for your listening audience that Hamas had every right under international law to attack its oppressor, Israel. Every right. Now, You can parse what they did on October the 7th to civilians, although we now know from Mearsheimer and others that probably 50% or better of the casualties on October the 7th were caused by the Israelis themselves, especially the Apache helicopters. But they did do some things that under the law of land warfare, they shouldn't have done. But basically, they had every right to attack their oppressor, Israel.
And let me just say this, as I tell folks in doing the critical thinking to your audience, I mean, use your own brains. It's a fact. It's not an opinion that they're under an occupation. And under an occupation, you have the right to fight back. Let's get it straight again. There's no ceasefire because Israel continued to bomb and provide, I just say, the deaths that they're killing, Palestinians. It's happening. It never stopped. It never ceased.
And just to add to what Dennis said, they are also cutting off the food again. Because Netanyahu has discovered through his use of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation at 4 feeding sites, he's discovered that the easiest, most efficient way is not bombs, bullets, and bayonets. It's food, holding food back. And not only holding food back, but killing the Palestinians when they congregate around the few food points there are. So he's discovered a war crime par excellence that's a more efficient way of killing. And he's using it. He's cut the food off again.
Starving a civilian population.
Yeah, it's grotesque, to put it mildly. Chief Fritz, what do you think is the end goal? And I'm going to ask both of you this in regards to Gaza. What does this look like at the, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years out? I don't believe for a moment that this quote unquote ceasefire, as they're calling it, is going to last. But what is the ultimate end goal in all of this? I mean, are they really going to kill 1.5 million people? If that's what's left.
As Larry alluded to, and I thank you for so kindly, always mentioning my book, Deadly Betrayal. That was the start of what is happening right now. It's not going to conclude until the final piece of that, and that is going to war with Iran. Why? I'll remind your audience again, why Iraq? Why Syria? Why Iran? Why previously Libya? Why? Because they were the ones that were supporting the Palestinians. They were the ones that was resisting the occupation of the entire Middle East if you left it in the hands of Bibi Netanyahu. And so is this going to end? No, it's not going to end until the big war happens. And that big war is between Iran and Israel and probably others that will be brought into this war. It's not going to end no time soon until Bibi, the so-called, what he sees in his mind, the Messiah, to have greater Israel, and that's not going to happen.
Colonel Wilkerson, you pointed out that there was new intelligence that Iran had the capability of effectively damaging Israel more than what they thought, in which case the war is postponed. What was the new intelligence? Just additional weaponry, armaments, working with China and Russia? What was the...
I think what's happened, Mossad has been throughout its career recruiting terrorists. I'll call them terrorists, guerrillas, call them fifth column, whatever you want, inside Iran. And it's been very successful. We saw that in the previous 12-day Beautiful War. But we also saw the Iranians essentially begin to appreciate this clandestine capability, if you will, of Israel, mostly funneled or fueled by money that probably came from our taxpayers, because these people were highly paid agents inside Iran, and they did a lot of damage to Iran. Well, Israel, since those 12 beautiful days, has been trying to reconstitute this kind of fifth column inside Iran. And they're Azeris, they're all manner of different people along the border regions, mostly Afghans and others, who are highly paid to go in and destabilize Iran. They have been singularly unsuccessful this time. The reason they've been unsuccessful is twofold. One, the Iranians figured this out. They're, after all, not total dummies for sure. And they got rid of a lot of these people, and their getting rid of them was rather draconian, as you might expect under the circumstances, because they did a lot of assassinations and things like that. So the Israelis are really lacking this third front, if you will, inside Iran this time around. The second thing they found out through their intelligence expertise, which is quite extensive, as you well know, they found out how much support Russia has given to Iran already, and they found out how much support Russia has promised Iran ultimately should they go to war with Israel, and even should they go to war with the United States ultimately. And this extends to all manner of assistance from Russia, up to and possibly including actual Russian pilots flying the very sophisticated fighter aircraft that are in Iran now by the squadrons and armed to the teeth, as well as the air defense outfits and so forth. China has said it will back Russia up in that effort. It's not going to put any troops on the ground, I don't think, but it's going to back Russia up. So you've got two of the biggest powers in the world in terms of military might standing behind Iran. And this is revolutionary, because if you check Iranian history, Persian history, you'll see there's always been great circumspection amongst the Persians as to whether or not they would deal with the Russians, the Soviets, or the Russians before the Soviets, because they've always coveted Iranian territory and always wanted some of that northern rim, if you will, and always wanted the oil coming out of the Persian Gulf. This is a long history. So it took a lot for the people in Iran, who aren't like Americans. They study history. They know their history, both the history of empire and the history of the recent, more modern Iran with the Shah and then the Ayatollah. So they know it's a difficult thing to bring the Iranian people around to cooperating with Russia. They have done that, and they have done it big time. And that shows you how serious Russia, China, and Iran are about defending all of their interests in Southwest Asia. So this is a different war that Israel is contemplating. And Netanyahu knows that because his intelligence knows that. But I don't think it's going to deter him, because he thinks what? What does he think? He thinks that Donald Trump is coming in to assist him when he gets Israel in peril.
Let me just add. Yeah, let me just.
Please.
No, I'm sorry. Let me just add to that. Let's go back to the last war. Forget intelligence and all that. Let's go back. If it was not for the U.S., if it was not for Jordan, if it was not for Egypt, if it was not for Saudi Arabia, there would have been more destruction in Israel. Do you think they quit fighting just because of the fact, oh, we want to do out of good deed? Have they quit fighting, as we alluded to, in Gaza? Oh, by the way, they're still bombing Lebanon. And think about that. There's been more bombs in Iran. In fact, I call that a true ceasefire, if you will, because the war is not over. It's not going to happen until that big war happens. That's the one between Iran and Israel. And probably everybody else will be thrown in that. Do you think the next time Qatar will be a part of the so-called alliance with Israel? No. It's already been proven they will get bombed. Now, let's go back. Iran, they bombed Qatar. And so you don't think they will do it again? And oh, by the way, Jordan, if this bigger war happened, if Jordan or Egypt decide that they won't, at the pressure from the U.S., support override clearances for Israeli warplanes, you think that's going to happen this time? No. And so, like I said, with all that said, Bibi Netanyahu considers himself the Messiah. His whole goal, he is one maniac. He truly is. He keeps these wars going. Now, Jamal, let me just jump on something else that's different. We keep talking about Trump. My biggest disappointment, and I must say this, it's probably 90%. I shouldn't use such a strong word, but it's about, let's say 98% of our Congress I don't like, because they've shown they're complicit. They're low down. Listen to what I'm about to say. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. They're low down, dirty bombs to allow this killing to completely happen and not say a word. Now, because they're so entrenched and love power and prestige, some of them are succumbing to the pressure that we're doing here in the United States of telling, hey, if you take AIPAC in the future, we're not going to vote for you. That movement is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then that's when you're going to find out how low down, dirty bombs our Congress is, because of the fact they're going to succumb to that pressure in the future. You know, let me just say another thing, and it's coming out into the open. I've been saying for over a year, TikTok. It wasn't about China. It was about Israel. And now Bibi Netanyahu has all let us know that. And so the awakening is happening. You know, I'm so sick and tired of Republicans making woke such a bad word. Well, we, all of America, and definitely the world already, they are woke to our country, to complicit in what has been happening in the Middle East and Israel. People are becoming more woke, a positive word. Stop letting the Republicans in the United States of America say woke is a bad word. It is a good thing. We are becoming woke. And I proudly say I am woke, and more others are becoming woke.
Jamal, let me just add one thing to that augments what Dennis is saying, with every word of which I agree with. Kushner and Witkoff made a huge historical and present day era in saying that there's plenty of land in Jordan, there's plenty of land in Egypt, there's plenty of land in other Arab countries for these Palestinians. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
Sisi in Egypt is sitting on a powder keg of people, refugees from East Africa. He can't feed and water the people he has in his country now. And he knows that, but he's under the pressure from the United States, not to do anything. And the king of Jordan, he's got lots of land to put these Palestinians on. Come on, Kushner, Witkoff, you're idiots. You're idiots. You're historical and present day idiots.
What's like 60% of Jordan is full of Palestinians or something like that? Like
more Palestinians by far than there are the king's people.
And let me just add, the king's wife is Palestinian.
Yes, she is. A very attractive woman. Yes, she is. Well, she is. I mean, I'm a guy. One of the things I'm curious, you brought up 2 points that I kind of want to hit, and I don't know if you know this answer to this, Colonel Wilkerson. Are these Russian pilots flying as mercenaries, or are they flying under the Russian banner? Like, we send troops to Ukraine all the time under the idea of them being mercenaries. I don't know if you remember this, Figaro, the French art magazine. I think this was within the first few months of the war. Reporter goes to Ukraine, and he's like, "Oh my God, the Americans are all over this place." Now, America's not going to acknowledge that they're all over this place. They are, quote unquote, mercenaries. And Russia's not going to acknowledge it, because the moment that you acknowledge it, you're stuck with the fact that we're acknowledging that European troops or American troops are ensconced all throughout this war. What is true in the sense of Russian pilots potentially flying for Iran? Are they flying under the Iranian banner, or are they flying under the Russian banner? I mean, those are radically two different things.
Yeah, Jamal, this is nothing new. The Russians flew against us in Vietnam. The Russians flew against us in Korea during those two conflicts.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to do. And what you do is you maintain territorial integrity. That is to say, you don't fly outside the borders of Iran. So if you go down, quote, in friendly hands, unquote.
I see.
But there's precedent for this. There's precedent for us doing this too, as a matter of fact. But the Russians have been very good about entering other conflicts. We used to call them third world conflicts, on the side of the country opposing us and flying against our pilots. And they're very good pilots. In fact, I've talked with pilots who flew against them in, say, the air battle over Hanoi, for example, where they were stunned by the talent that came in suddenly, and that gave them a lot of trouble. Started shooting them down, for example, because the Russians have pretty damn good pilots. And of course, they're proficient in their aircraft, which are every bit as good aircraft for aircraft as ours are. In fact, I'd say a couple of their aircraft are better than ours. Top of their line fighters are better than ours. They're younger too, they're fresher. And then when you have the help on the ground with sophisticated things like S-400s or S-300 air defense capability and other things like that, then if you die on friendly territory. And so your body's evacuated and nobody ever knows. Now, does the CIA, does Mossad know? Absolutely. But what are they going to do with that information? Go out and scream that Russia's in the war? Are the Russians going to really be deterred by that? No. So this is a thing that happens all the time. There are Russian pilots, I'll guarantee you right now, flying for other countries in other places where combat might be contemplated than you would think. For example, I'm told there are some that have been experimenting in Somalia with what we're doing there. This gets them experience. It gets them combat experience that they wouldn't get elsewhere. So that happens as well, that they get a place where they can train. Ukraine is used for that, but it's not much of a training ground now because they've shot Ukraine out of the air. Mm-hmm. They've shot them completely out of the air. Russia has what we call air supremacy, not just air superiority. They have air supremacy over Ukraine. So it's just done. And everybody that knows about it usually keeps it quiet because everybody does it.
Hey, let me just say something that Larry just said. You know, I've said this in the past before too. You know, there are people that like what Trump is doing. Their problem with Trump, and I said it before, I'll say it again. He says the quiet part out loud.
Yes,
you know, and it's almost like he gave the number of aircraft, you know, that we were supporting Israel on. I mean, I would have never imagined, you know, all the refuelers that we had and all the fighters we had up in the air, you know, doing that. I guess we call it the 12-day war or whatever the case may be. He says the quiet part out loud. And probably the worst one he made was about the CIA authorization to do certain things in Venezuela that he said out loud, you know, which would probably be the most top secret information that we have right now going on, because we have a history of doing that, but we always kept it quiet, you know. And now Trump says that, you know, out loud of what we're doing. The other thing, whether it be real or subliminal or whatever the case may be, you know, him saying, if Hamas doesn't do what they're supposed to do, we will go in. Then he got corrected. You know, somebody asked him in the press about, hey, do you mean we have boots on the ground? Well, going back a little what Larry said earlier, yeah, as long as we continue to support BB, yeah, we will have boots on the ground, whether you like it or not. That's always been the case with us. Now, let me go back and say something else when I was saying I'm so mad at our Congress, because this thing is going to explode. And where Congress come into play, I mean, if we're going to go to war, where's the authorization from Congress for us to go to war? Because it's going to happen. Bibi's going to do everything he can to draw us into this.
And under international law, Jamal, we're at war with Venezuela right now. And
there you go. We declared war on them.
Congress has not said a word. And while we're talking about the CIA and Donald Trump revealing things, in his first term, Donald Trump signed a presidential finding and sent it to Mike Pompeo, then director of the CIA, to overthrow Maduro. So we have been doing this ever since Donald Trump's first term. And let me tell you, Joe Biden and Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan did nothing to stop it.
Nothing. And this is why I say we have a history of doing this, no matter what administration. It's in our DNA. It goes back to what something that Larry just said. Back in his first administration, we were doing this. But Trump says the quiet part out loud. He has told us himself.
Will we be dragged into this war with Iran at some point? I mean, this seems mental to me, that there's an acknowledgement. We got hit the first time around, meaning the 12-day war. Israel took a beating. This time around, they acknowledge China and Russia are going to be far more engaged into this conflict. And yet we're still going in because we believe America is going to come in to save us, which I guess the question is, will we?
I don't think,
knowing the consequences of this, will we get engaged in this larger war?
I don't think that Trump has any choice, given his commitment to Miriam Adelson and other people like that. I don't think he has any choice. And just here's another thing that's going to happen when it becomes apparent that Israel is going down. Then Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, and other countries will pounce. They will pounce, and there will be no Israel, period. And I don't know that the United States can tolerate that under any pressure.
You think they'll pounce? I mean, up to this point, they've been very,
Listen, I was going to say that earlier. I was alluding to it already when I mentioned Qatar. I do personally think they're going to pounce. I was going to mention that. I do.
That they're going to throw off the yoke of America and go after Israel. I mean, up to this point, they've been working side by side by Israel. Qatar has been knocking.
We've been counting on these so-called Abraham Accords and all that. I want you to think about this officially. There's only two countries over there that has what I would call an official peace deal with Israel. and that is Jordan and Egypt. Discount the Abraham Accords for right now. I'm talking about official. Iraq, for example, was the first leg of this war that's continually happening right now. Mm-hmm. They have no diplomatic ties with Israel. After that big war, they have no diplomatic ties. Of course they will. And we alluded to this earlier. The majority of the country in Jordan is what? Palestinian. I'm surprised that the king is lasting this long, to be quite frank with you. Yeah. You know, I'm surprised they haven't been over. Yeah. So I'll leave it at that. Yes, I will not be surprised they were all jump, because that 1.3 billion to Jordan, the 1.8 to Egypt is not going to mean a thing.
Not when they can get rid of their number one enemy in the
There
region.
You go. Exactly. That's the only reason they're getting that money right now. Bribery to have peace with Israel. 1.8, 1.3 billions of dollars, and it won't mean a thing if Israel goes down. And oh, by the way, now think about this for a moment. As we talked about Iran's capability, Russia offered help in the 12-day war, but they refused it. We got it. We got this. Okay. Now they're going to accept that help. And as Larry mentioned earlier, China's probably not going to put any boots on the ground and be involved, but they will provide support. You take that to the bank. They have no choice but to.
Yeah. One last question on the Gaza issue. There was a report that there was supposed to be peacekeeping troops on the ground by various Arab states. And some of the reporting came out that this most likely wasn't going to happen, that they were bothered by the prospect that they were helping Israel if they did this. This was right here. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this was on Israeli media that it came out with. It's funny how Israeli media brings up the stuff in American media and doesn't touch it. Fearing a conflict with Hamas, countries refuse to send soldiers. Yeah, it's amazing, right? They would admit stuff that you would never hear in American media.
They probably have a direct hotline into the New York Times. I would almost bet on that.
Would they?
Israel.
So, give me your take on this. I mean, do you think that this ultimately is going to take place, this quote unquote peacekeeping force that they were referring to at one point? Either one of you can jump in on this.
Well, I don't think the Arab states will do anything to that impact. Even the King of Jordan, who's the most hard pressed and in the most difficult situation immediately, because as Kushner and Witkoff said, we're going to push a few of these Palestinians over onto Jordan. Right. They got plenty of room. Even he, I think, at the last moment, if he sees, and this is critical, they've got to see, as Israel is under maximum duress, which they will be if they re-engage with Iran, he's got to see America holding fire. If that happens, they will go in with a vengeance, and it is the end of the state of Israel.
Wait, what do you mean America holding fire? You mean if America doesn't get involved?
Yeah.
But both of you, I think
it would be a similar thing to the 1956 Suez crisis, for example, when Israel, France, and Britain all teamed up and went into Suez, and the United States, rather than saying, I bless thee, said, get out. And do you know, people don't talk about this much. The French and the British got out almost immediately. The Israelis stayed and lingered and lingered and lingered and refused to remove themselves. And Eisenhower got to the point where he essentially said, you either get out or I'll make you get out. And then they finally left.
But do you see that from, I think both of you come to the assessment that the United States will back Israel in whatever war they get involved in with Iran, or correct me if I'm wrong.
Eisenhower was the last president, I would say, might have given that second thought. The last one. That was a long time ago.
In the beginning, I think they will. But, Trump is afraid of, he always talking about how the American lives were lost in the wars. He prevented all these wars. He's stopping all these wars and so forth. I think in the beginning, possibly. But as soon as Iran hit Qatar, as soon as the few forces, some of our forces are leaving Iraq now. Think about that for a moment. Some of our forces are leaving Iraq now. But whatever is left there, I think the Iranians will hit them. And I think, the American people will be in the streets. I really do believe that. We're already proven now that we're getting in the streets just from this past weekend, if you will. 7 million, I think, across the United States of America. I think Trump will probably, Trump is a wheeler and dealer. He thinks about self only. So at the end, if we start seeing Americans being killed, I think Trump will find some way to get out of it and say, hey, Bibi, you're on your own. I really do. Because of the fact, I don't think he wants that under him, being the so-called Biden and Obama and Bush that got Americans killed. Because let it be, be known. If this war breaks out, Iran will not hold back this time. They have no choice but to go full force and go for it.
We have, and Jamal, that will be the moment that I will stand up on my high horse and tell John Mearsheimer and Steve Walt, see, I told you so. Because that will be America losing its power in Southwest Asia, period.
Yeah. I want to hit Russia for a minute. We have about 20 minutes. So Donald Trump apparently went with this massive bluff again. Initially, there was bone-crushing sanctions. And then he went with the whole Tomahawk missile thing. And God, I kicked myself because initially I was like, this is a bluff. I wasn't even talking about it. And then as he got to the end and Putin's response was somewhat mild towards it, I was like, okay, well, maybe they do send the Tomahawks. Okay, well, no, that's a bluff. Donald Trump has a conversation with Putin that's supposed to go for 2.5 hours. And then immediately said, we're going to have the Budapest summit. Apparently, Lavrov and Rubio had a conversation. The conversation apparently went nowhere. Russia's demands hadn't changed. And I guess my question is, why would the Trump administration believe at all that Russian demands would change, considering what's taking place on the battlefield? Ukraine is getting routed. And yet, Trump still has this kind of odd belief that he can get something out of this other than the surrender document that Putin is effectively continuously given the U.S. and given Ukraine. Give me your thoughts on that. I mean, what's the disconnect that's being missed here?
Well, I would always say Trump is the disconnect. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. And it's quite apparent that he doesn't have anyone in his administration that knows what they're doing. I think he has now quit listening to Kellogg, for example, which is a good thing. I think Kellogg has been put in the closet on a back burner or banned from the White House, whatever, because he's been being lied to. And apparently from Trump's recent comments, Trump finally is beginning to realize he's been being lied to. So now he's got to deal with reality, and that's going to be an extremely difficult reality to deal with, because that reality, Jamal, has not changed since the very first day Vladimir Putin launched the special military operation. It has always been the same thing. It is to ensure that there is no formidable NATO presence on the CSTO, read its primary member, Russia's territory or near it, that threatens Russia. Period. Out. If there is, I will destroy it. And that's what he's been involved in with the special military operation, and is now bringing to a resounding and victorious conclusion, with the only imponderable being whether he swings a little south and left and takes the only port Ukraine will have left in a post-war situation, Odessa, and cuts Ukraine off completely. And what the EU is doing, for example, is utterly disastrous. They have just said that they are going to let Ukraine, this is to get under Trump's skin and to get under Putin's skin even more. They're going to let Ukraine's produce, which would still be in a rump state, even quite prodigious, go into the EU with no tariffs, no increase in costs at all. Well, you got farmers in Poland right now who are saying, what the, this isn't going to work either. So the EU is participating in this disaster.
Yeah, they're going to burn that place down. Poland is not going to accept that. I mean, they were already protests about produce going into the EU.
And Sikorsky comes out about the supposed meeting in Budapest and says, if Putin overflies Poland, we might take him down as a war criminal and try him or turn him over to the court. What an idiot to think that even Putin would fly over Poland without adequate protection to blow the Poles out of the air in the first place. But second, he's got other ways to get in there. And third, I hear the meeting's off now.
Well, so there's very diplomatic language around it. Russia continues to go with the idea that, well, from our point of view, nothing has changed. But again, this is political language. This is like, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the message comes and the U.S. ignores the second message that comes through from Khrushchev's office. It seems that they're going with this impression of, well, from our point of view, nothing has changed. We've been not alerted to the fact that this meeting is off. This is Western media talking about it, etc. When Donald Trump mentioned it, Donald Trump pointed out, yeah, I don't want to waste my time, but then was like, well, I don't know, I'll let you guys know in a couple of days. So it could be on, it could be off. I have no clue which one this is. Initially they were going with the idea of a ceasefire. We need a long-term solution to this. Then he pivoted back to ceasefire. I believe Financial Times reporting on this, that Trump told Zelensky, Putin says he will destroy Ukraine if he don't accept his terms. But then Trump immediately backs up to ceasefire. That's what I'm saying. There seems like I'm missing something in regard to the way that Trump is appraising this.
Hey, Jamal, let me just give you, you heard me say before, facts, opinions, assumptions. I'm going to give you an opinion. First of all, let me just give you a fact. That's something that Larry said earlier. We would not be here right now if it wasn't for no president, whether it be anybody, Trump, Bush, Biden, Obama, if it wasn't for our foreign policy. Right. We have no empathy for the security needs of other countries, in particular Russia. It goes all the way back to after World War II and the Cold War, when, we created NATO. I think, Larry is a historian. I rely on him a lot with his unbelievable, beautiful brain that he has, that he thinks is residing. But no, it is still there. He's still so sharp. I think it was Dean Igleson. I think he was the Secretary of State under Truman, to help develop NATO. There's no longer a Soviet Union, but we always wanted to contain Soviet Union. We got rid of the Soviet Union. It's Russia, but we continue to expand NATO. We continue to do that until Putin said no more. You would not have NATO right at our door. So now going back to the original question, I think what happened in that 2-hour phone call, Putin told Trump, opinion, I don't know, that, hey, listen, we can stop this. But Ukraine is not getting the Donbass region back. Crimea is ours now. Larry mentioned Odessa. I said, well, that could be under negotiation, whatever the case may be. But they're not getting Crimea. They're not getting Donbass region back. And so I think Trump took that. And I heard there was a big argument, again, but not in public this time, between Trump and Zelensky. And Trump probably told him, so we can get this, hey, here's what you have to do to stop this. And Zelensky said, no, I'm not going to do this. Probably from European countries whispering in his ear, Zelensky's ear. That's my assumption. But I think after that 2.5-hour meeting, Putin told Trump, we can stop this. We're going to keep the Donbass region. We're going to keep Crimea, and this can stop. And oh, by the way, you will not expand for sure this time NATO any further. It stops now. And Trump took that and said, okay, I'm with you, Putin. Now, I'm going to give you my personal opinion. There are some that say, hey, you can't give back land, but I will support that plan, my personal opinion, because you have Russian-speaking folks in that Donbass region. Russia see that as a security need for them. Now, there may be many people disagree with me on that, but in order to stop this war, I would agree with this, because before even Russia went into Ukraine, Zelensky was bombing that area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was bombing that area. So I'm just giving your audience information to do their own critical thinking, because I want to tell you, and I'll say it again, I feel bad to say it because I love living in America, but our foreign policy, our government officials are corrupt.
How would they even end this war? How could Putin even accept a deal from the U.S.? We've had Minsk 1 and 2. We've had Istanbul agreements. All of these things were effectively, Minsk agreements were nonsense. They even acknowledged that these were nonsense. They used a quote unquote peace deal in order to provoke a war for all intents and purposes. Knowing this and knowing that the U.S. hasn't given up this notion of primacy, how can Russia even make an agreement or deal with the U.S. knowing the previous experience in this case? We're an untrustworthy actor in the way that we operate. Is it even possible?
If you're asking me, Jamal, I would say if I were Putin and Sergei Lavrov and anyone, Dmitriev, whomever in Russia, I would not want to trust the United States any further than I could spit. And I'd have to have a really dry mouth. We just aren't trustworthy. And it's not just the situation in Ukraine. They also watched us do what we did with regard to Iran,
Yes.
There you go.
whom they consider an independent country under the international auspices just as much as they are and we are. And we're the only ones that consider them a pariah. You know, we're the pariah. Increasingly, we're the pariah. So I don't see any reason whatsoever in Sergei Lavrov's recent remarks, biting as they were in both English and Russian. And I'm told, I don't understand Russian, but I'm told much more so in Russian. It has Russian has a particular proclivity for being biting and nuanced. And he essentially said, it's over. We do not have, nor do we contemplate a relationship with you anymore. Now, I was listening to the other Russian, Dmitriev, I think his name is, talking about the tunnel under the Barents Sea and using that as a sort of enticement to better relations between Washington and Moscow. That could well be, but that would be, I think, on a purely commercial basis. It would be beneficial to both Alaska and ultimately the rest of the United States. A lot of jobs created in Alaska, and beneficial to the Far East of Russia, because let's face it, Putin has real problems in his Far East because the Chinese are taking it over. So to have a channel of other input into the Far East of Russia would be positive. But these are the only reasonable remarks, and they're commercial based, that I'm hearing between the two countries' capitals. Otherwise, I think Russia has given up on us, and that's dangerous.
Let me just add,
Oh, please.
as I said,
Chief, please.
opinions, assumptions, and facts. Let me give you a fact when we talk about trust. Fact regarding Russia. Baker, under George H.W., under Reagan, we said that we will not expand NATO at all. What did we do? We expanded NATO. There was no longer a Soviet Union. There was no longer a Warsaw Pact. Trust. Iran. We overthrew their democratic elected government and put in the Shah. Mm-hmm. We broke the nuclear deal. We supported Israel in the middle of negotiations. We supported Israel's attack on Iran. Trust. Facts.
Yeah, but don't you need trust to get any kind of deal? And I guess that's kind of the rub, right? So is the expectation that there is no deal, that the U.S. is deal incapable, especially on Russian terms? I mean, Russia just sent a memo, I guess they call it a non-paper, reiterating their terms, considering that Ukraine, Europe, and the U.S. now seem to be on the same page, where they backed up again to this idea of a ceasefire. And Russia's made it very clear, full Russian control over the entire Donbass region. They're rejecting Trump's proposal to freeze the front lines. The front line thing makes no sense. The idea that Russia is winning a war, clearly winning a war, and that they're supposed to go home and allow Ukraine to rearm, that's nonsense. And yet they continue to repeat this nonsense, ignoring the reality taking place on the ground. I guess the question for this is, A, what is Europe's angle in this? And B, is the U.S. just incapable of a deal on Russian terms? And Chief,
no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, Chief.
Let me just go back to something. When I said trust, I used examples. When Larry said, "Hey, can we be trusted?" I just use examples of why we can't be trusted. However, Trump doesn't rely on trust. Okay, but what I'm telling you in regards to Trump, he's all about self. I think that, as I alluded to earlier, I'm just gave you an opinion and assumption earlier that once, as you just mentioned, once Putin said, hey, Donbass, ours, Crimea, remain ours, I think Trump would take that deal because of the fact he wants to be considered the peace president. I stopped all these wars. That won't be based on trust, though, but it'll be based on Trump's, his ego. I stopped this war. Now, when you talk about America's trust as a whole, I don't know what would happen after Trump's leave office, just like we did at Iran nuclear deal. And the next administration, Trump broke that deal. And so I don't know if any deal is really about trust, but I think Trump will do this deal. And then I will tell you, what is Ukraine? What can they do? You know, they've got to rely on Europe. You know, I think Trump is already, he doesn't want to be a part of NATO. He told us that earlier on. So I think that'll give him the reason to back out and say, hey, you got this. Now, Trump gets a lot of pressure from internal forces that like our foreign policy, you know, of being in control of the world and so forth. So, Jamal, our world right now is in a state of confusion, and it's very scary, you know, right now.
Colonel, hit that for me. Is the U.S. deal incapable, meaning this war has to come to a conclusion on the military front?
Well, it already has, I think, come to a conclusion on the military front. We're just mopping up now, as it were. Yeah. And Zelensky knows that. And I think one positive thing Trump did was point it out to Zelensky. I think he pointed it out to him in very glaring terms, like, you're losing, buddy. or even more powerful, you've lost, buddy. Get used to it. That's probably what Trump told him. And I have a inside contact that sort of indicates to me that his language was that forceful. And we've seen before how he could be forceful with Zelensky if he wanted to be. And I think in this case, he probably was. Now, he may be trying to back up from that, but he does have a problem with the Europeans. He does have a problem with Starmer, Merkel, Macron, and Merz in Germany, and to a certain extent others, but those three principally. But they're going to be gone very soon. Merz is in deep trouble right now with his own coalition. They're criticizing him stridently in his own coalition. Macron is a dead man walking, and Starmer's never seen an opposition like he has right now. I don't know why they don't have a vote of no confidence and toss him out on his ear, probably because a lot of the parliament agrees with him most of the time. But it's a real painful situation to have to watch, and Trump's going to have to get some real character, which Trump is lacking dismally, in order to make this happen, over the lack of trust and around the lack of trust to make it happen. And Dennis is right. It's got to have some kind of commercial or deal for Trump in it before he's going to do that in a forceful way. And I think some of those things are aborting right now, but whether they'll come to fruition in time to really be effective is another matter altogether. And I don't look for Trump to make any decisive move with regard to it, as long as he does have this ball and chain of the Europeans, which he's crafted. We crafted this ball and chain around his legs. And the ball and chain is augmented majorly by the idiots in Brussels who see their jobs going away. Admirals, generals, others, they see their jobs going away.
But Trump could always walk. Like, meaning the nuclear option is the walk.
Yeah.
That seems to be off the table for him. And I guess my thing,
Jamal, I got an interview with Belgrade. I've been trying to get this for a long time, so I can log on in about a minute. So I'm going to have to leave you with my competent and capable friend, Dennis Fritz.
No, you're perfectly fine. We've come to the end anyway. We have like 2 minutes. So, but look, I want to thank you both. Both of you are fantastic. Let me bring in Dennis, just so we have a thing. There we are. Yeah, both of you are fantastic. And I guess I'll ask you, Dennis, as to close it. What do you think the Europeans have in this? Like, what's the thing for them that they hold on to this bone? I have my own ideas, but I'm curious on yours. And this will be the last question.
You know, Jamal, I just think that Europeans, led by us in the past, has been living in past history. You know, I think NATO has outlived itself. I really do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard for some Europeans to let that go. Like Larry said, you know, whether we like it or not, we talk about the military-industrial complex, NATO, war, and all that. That's money. Think about this for a moment. Larry said something earlier. Generals, civilian leaders in NATO will lose jobs and so forth. And so I got to tell you, I think all this is all about power and prestige. And so I think truly, believe it or not, you know, like I said, the old school doesn't want to let this go. But Trump is right in one way. You know, NATO has outlived itself. He's never been a fan of NATO because we were donating the majority of the money, the finance, for NATO. So I think NATO has outlived itself. And I think the old guard is having a hard time letting it go. But I think they will be forced to, because something you said earlier, if Trump just back out, there's really no NATO. And I think other countries, you'll see other alliances starting. So I think the only way this war is going to end is, as I stated earlier, that whether you like it or not, for Russia's peace of mind, for Putin's peace of mind, for their security needs, that the Donbass region is gone. And I think Trump told Zelensky that. Crimea is gone for good. I think Putin told Trump that, and Trump relayed that to Zelensky. And I think that's the only way the war is going to end. And if that happens, NATO countries are not going to have no choice but to support that. Because without the U.S., to be quite frank with you, there's no NATO. We're the ones that really put NATO together, and we're going to probably be the one to end it. Because I heard some general on CNN today say somewhat, America cannot be trusted. Trust again. They talk about NATO countries can't trust us now. Well, I think that's a good thing, because I'm tired of us trying to be the police of the world, because guess what? We don't have the finances to do that no longer. We're in debt. We got a government closure right now, people starving. And I think NATO is coming to an end. And I think the old guard is going to have to let that go.
Yeah, that will require Trump to face down Europe, which he seems reluctant to do.
Because that's the internal pressures that we talked about. They're right here in the U.S. It's a world thing. Right here in the U.S., we don't want to let go of that prestige and power. We don't. I always find it amazing. We want to be the leader of the world. Why? It's about control and power and money.
Well, for that, you should at least be able to keep the government open. Right. Chief, always appreciate you, man. Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, Chief Dennis Fritz. Dennis Fritz, he's retired Command Chief Master Sergeant of the United States Air Force, former director of the Eisenhower Media Network, with the mission to promote peace and diplomacy over war. Please check out his book, Deadly Betrayal, The Truth About Why the United States Invaded Iraq. And we also had Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He is former distinguished visiting professor at the Government and Public Policy at the College of William & Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He also taught 6 years at the University Honors Program at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And he is probably best known as retired United States Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff to the United States Secretary of Defense, Colin Powell. Chief, thank you for this. Always appreciate you, man. Be safe.
Thanks for having us always. Take care.
Have a good one. Bye-bye. All right. Love both of them. Great interview. I'm going to go from one guest that I really enjoyed to another guest that I am always appreciative of. Margaret Kimberley, how you doing? You doing okay today?
I am. I'm doing fine. It's good to be back.
It is always good to have you. Thank you for coming on a bit later. This is a full show. This show is going to go till like 12 in the morning. So this is going to be late. But we have Margaret Kimberley. She is a senior columnist and editor at Black Agenda Report, author of Prejudicial, Black Americas and the Presidents. You can check out a Freedom Ride blog that is on Twitter. Margaret, thank you for joining me. I whenever you come on the show, I always look up the articles to see if there's anything that's on the marquee. And of course, one of the main things is the No Kings protests.
Yes.
Now, what's funny about that is many of the people that I talked to have had a very similar sentiment. You guys on Black Agenda Report called it, where is it? I'm trying to get the exact term for it.
We had two good articles.
Yeah, they're two good articles. One is
and
infantile,
one from Anthony Rogers Wright.
Infantile, juvenile, height of fancy. And yours was the lure of spectacle. The lure of I don't have the things up, but the people in the frog costumes, the breakdancing chicken, I know why they did it, right? They did it because there was like all of these people are violent and everything else. It's like, okay, well, we're going to make people look silly and we're going to go in frog costumes. And so we're going to humiliate ourselves and by definition, humiliate the opposition by showing this is nonsense. This is a far cry from men in suits saying I'm a man. Give me your take on this quote unquote No Kings protests. The largest, by the way, in U.S. history, apparently.
Yeah, 7 million people around the country. Huge here in New York City, an estimated 100,000 people. But that's part of the problem, that people look back and they talk about the March on Washington, the many actions that resulted in the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and other programs that were helpful to so many millions of people, or the first Earth Day marches that led Nixon to establish the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. That was a result of protest. So people look at that and think, aha, we need a big event, when that's backwards. It's not the spectacle that got results, it's the organizing. And organizing should start small. We say all politics are local. That's a true expression, I think. So while people around the country, there's grassroots organizing over any number of issues, and you build the grassroots organizations, you build them, form coalitions, and that's what creates progress. You don't start with a big march and then say, think you're changing things, especially when the big march in question is, frankly, just a Democratic Party get out the vote effort. That's all No Kings is. The organization that's called for it, Indivisible, is run by former Democratic Party operatives. The goal of the No Kings, the event organizers, is to get people out to vote in the midterm elections and in 2028. And that cannot be the impetus for thinking that you're organizing, for thinking that you're going to change things, for thinking that you can oppose the Trump administration. So it's backwards and it's cynical. So that's my problem with No Kings. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, there are prayers in the background, and I muted when because of the background noise. There was no demands either.
Correct.
Like, you can make a case that said, well, we don't want a king as a demand. Fair enough. But as you pointed out, this is kind of a Democratic get out the vote campaign. Hillary Clinton apparently gave her an announcement. Kamala Harris gave her announcement. And I think the no demands thing is not a bug, it's a feature.
Exactly.
Like, it's like Harris's campaign, right? We don't want you. There was no demands placed on that campaign. And all things being equal, Harris was promising this kind of pity-ante stuff to pretty much every little group. Nobody believed that she was going to do any of it, but it was just her way of doing it. Meaning there's no, say, this is what we expect. Because we don't want you to say this is what you expect. We just want you to get out and vote. There's a difference in those things. And I think that's a problem.
Well, as you said, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Democratic Party does not want people to make demands. They don't want to hear from their people. They don't want them to make demands. So if they're going to have a big march, of course, it's going to be free of demands, or else at the end, when people were saying, where are the demands were to be pro-Ukraine. Something about the colors were blue and yellow or something. And that's about continuing what is the current forever war, it looks like to me, continuing U.S. imperialism. So no, they don't want issues. And if they do, it's something that the party establishment and the oligarchs want. So and it's unfortunate because people argued with each other about it. Is it worthwhile? Isn't it worthwhile? Well, at least we're doing something. Don't you have to show up? How can you not join everybody else? And people feel good. Everybody feels good if you're marching with thousands of other people and you're making common cause about thinking things that are important to you. But that's what makes it dangerous. The harder work of finding people to work on issues that are important to you, to really organize your block, your neighborhood, your town or city, that's much harder. And it's less attractive, frankly, than being in a march with thousands of other people. And there are fun elements, as you were pointing out. I'm not saying people, well, actually, I am saying people should stop doing that. You know, the last thing I want to see is someone cosplaying, what is that TV show, Handmaid's Tale, people dressed in those stupid costumes. It's dumb. Stop it. Stop it. It is very unserious. And and people are actually parodies of themselves. There's a picture of Kamala Harris's husband, whose name escaped, Doug Emhoff, right? That's his name. Posing with the protester who actually has on a sign, we're going to brunch or something. I'm like, can people stop with the brunch signs? I mean, it's a joke.
What's the brunch?
What's
thing?
that?
You said
oh,
the brunch
people
thing.
saying, you know, if Kamala Harris had won, we could all be at brunch now, which is also a declaration of unseriousness in and of itself. So you want to continue your normal life, so you can't stand Trump and you think he's a fascist. But for you, if Kamala Harris were president, you wouldn't have to pay attention to anything, and you could just live your life of. And I'm not saying people shouldn't want a happy life, but that's very, very unserious. If I had a march, you'd be banned if you had a sign that said, if Kamala won, we could all be at brunch, or if Trump were gone, we could all be I'd say, go back home. That would be me. But that's serious. That's serious organizing, and not this top-down effort from people who paved the way for Trump. I don't think we should not shrink from saying that the Democratic Party is to blame for both of Trump's victories. Yeah. Hillary Clinton did not take him seriously. She spent her campaign trying to paint him as a Russian puppet and getting the national security state to spy on him. And that is absolute. And it kills me to say that Trump is right. They were spying on him. They were entrapping people to make him the issue with Russia, instead of doing the grunt work of a campaign, getting people out in swing states. She needed 78,000 more votes in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. How do you raise $1 billion and you can't get 80,000 more people out? I mean, the incompetence and her own corruption. The email story broke, and everybody wants to act like it's no big deal. It was a big deal. How does the Secretary of State not use the State Department server? You would do that if you're hiding something. Right. And she was still involved with the Clinton Foundation, the slush fund, influence peddling slush fund. And instead of just being Secretary of State, just looking presidential, that's all she needed to do. She was going to try to be slick, and she's a horrible politician. And that all of that, to make a long story short, all of those things led to Trump's victory in 2016. In 2024, you had Biden, you know, grandpa wouldn't give up the keys. Mm-hmm. Instead of his approval rating was below 50%. He should not have run. And the Democratic big money people stayed behind him, and then they dumped him at the end, and they put Kamala forward when nobody voted for her. Nobody wanted her. Then, of course, they allowed the thing that would have guaranteed. I've often said, I think I've said it on your show before, if there had still been a child tax credit, people wouldn't have cared that Biden was senile. They wouldn't have cared. He could have stayed in the race. Agreed. But they didn't offer people anything after first marketing themselves most progressive since FDR, cutting child poverty in half, because they know what people want. Then they didn't give people what they want, or they let it disappear. And of course they lost. So I think it's so sorry.
You're fine. You're perfectly fine.
I always turn off my phone, and I forgot to. And instead of doing those basic things that would get people out, it led to Trump. And if you can talk about Trump being horrible and he won because he's racist, and well, that's I think, defeatist. And it also lets people off the hook who are responsible for him winning again. So I don't think we can say this enough. It's Democratic wars, Democratic Party austerity, all of these things that they're in favor of. They lost favor with the people, and that's why he won. And now they want to paint him as the only villain, and it's easy to do when you see what he's doing with the tariffs that are bankrupting farmers and the ICE raids. There was an ICE raid on Canal Street in Manhattan yesterday.
Yep.
And it's interesting. Canal Street is a place where people go to buy so-called knockoffs, designer stuff with fake labels. And it's immigrants, mostly African immigrants now, who sell these fake pocketbooks on the street. And people go there to shop, including tourists from all over the country. But somebody decides, because these are African immigrants and they're undocumented, that they had to have this big show of force. So they had ICE in New York City, and you can see the people. It's very spontaneous. I was very pleased to see New Yorkers come out obstructing the raid, and which is very dangerous now because the Trump administration is arresting people. If you take a picture of ICE or follow them or anything, people are being charged with or getting federal charges. But people came out, and this is organizing. This is what people should be uplifting. This is what should be replicated around the country. And that's harder to do than to have Democratic oligarchs throw a big march that's actually meaningless.
But this is organic, though. Like, this doesn't feel like organized. This feels like people are pissed off.
Well, but that's how you start the organizing, because there are people, Trump, I haven't been here since his speech with the generals, and he talked about it's very dangerous. There's an enemy within, and you should be able to take people out in this country like you do around the world. And Antifa, this fake non-existent organization, and we're going to clean up the big cities. This is terrible. He declared war on the people of this country. And fighting that is going to be hard, but it's something but you can see with that spontaneous action, that's what many people want to do. And that's the way to the issue to organize, or an issue to organize around. And there are other issues as well. So, but that's harder work. It's harder work to determine what the principles of an organization are, a plan of action. That's more difficult. Who are you going to be in coalition with? Are you going to struggle over differences? But that's the real work of change. But that gives me hope, because that shows you don't get 7 million people to turn out unless people do want change. I suppose that's the good thing about the No Kings March. It shows you that there are people who want to do something, because we have this fake opposition party who aren't doing enough. They are so far holding the line on the budget agreement, and the government's shut down because of it. But it's the people who are going to have to give this kind of direction. And as difficult as that can be, that's the way to get change. I'm sure there'll be more No Kings marches. There was one earlier this year, but I'm encouraging people not to participate. I am taking a side here, and I know that's controversial, because some people say, well, I don't want to go, but maybe other people should. I think we have to say no, that this is not moving the needle at all. And so I won't be participating. The U.S. is about to go to war against Venezuela. That wasn't an issue, and it's something that's flying under the radar. Nobody except Rand Paul, conservative Republican, nobody's talking about, or very few people are talking.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, like, look, Obama had to kill this, right? Where Obama said it was perfectly okay for the U.S. to murder people abroad. And he was shocked that the kill list kept getting larger. It's like, hey, it's surprising to me that when you kill people, that other people get pissed off about the fact that you've been killing people. And even to the point of killing Americans. And what was the argument that they made, that Eric Holder? I distinctly remember this because I was sitting there like, what did he just say? Where Eric Holder argued, look, what he said, the judicial jurisprudence or something, I'm paraphrasing, but jurisprudence doesn't necessarily need to take place through the judicial branch. It can take place through the executive branch. And people are like, oh, okay, well, Obama said it, so it's okay. Or Eric Holder said he's with Obama, so that's okay. It's like
it was horrible.
Yeah, he just acknowledged.
It was absolutely horrible. And it's that kind of thing that makes it difficult to argue against Trump, to say, well, we don't have to give you your day in court. Yes, you do. The Constitution is very clear, and we're always told Obama was a constitutional lawyer. Well, it didn't do us much good, did it? When he decided he could kill Anwar al-Awlaki, a U.S. citizen, and his teenage son, among other people, and argue for indefinite detention. So Trump is not the first person to come up with these things. He's really weaponized it with ICE. But we have to talk about how the Democrats led us here. And that's just one of the many issues that people need to do some hard work behind, that is not connected to electoral politics and not connected with the Democratic Party.
No, agreed. Agreed. People, agreed. They don't seem to acknowledge, or at the very least accept, that Trump doesn't exist without your failings. Meaning, like, you don't really get this rise of the right without this kind of complete failure and collapse of the left. And it seemed that the party had gotten in its mind, well, we don't really have to do anything. We just need to not be Republicans. We need to be least worse. Missing the point that at a certain point, it becomes very difficult to make the distinction, meaning it has to be enough of a differential for me to care. And if you get to the point where you've fallen so low that the only real political angle that you have is Donald Trump is a fascist, Donald Trump is evil, Donald Trump is, going to eat babies. Okay, that becomes, it's like, that's an argument. It's not going to be an argument to get me out of bed. They will get some people out of bed if you're a Democrat. But if people don't believe you, like, meaning they were arguing, they were so shrill, they were screaming that Trump was going to shoot Liz Cheney. That was like the closing arguments that these guys were making, and which makes you think, it's like, okay, these guys are in trouble.
Well, the whole Liz Cheney thing, I mean, that was the sure sign of defeat. I could not believe they were focusing their campaign on somebody Republicans and Democrats didn't care about. Republicans hated. It was so insane to me. Yeah. But they don't want to do much. That's why, the only thing saving the Democrats now in this, because this is so extreme, with the healthcare issue. I mean, talk about an issue that impacts everyone, that they are still obsessed with Obamacare.
I have a pet peeve about that, by the way. But please continue.
You have a what?
I have a pet peeve about that. But please continue. I get to my pet peeve after you finish.
Okay. Well, it's a reality. Millions of people depend on these Affordable Care Act subsidies. And people are getting the bills for next year. They're getting them now, and they're premiums are tripling and quadrupling. And so the Democrats have, I think they're standing up for now, because it's such a basic issue to so many people, and including to some Republicans. So I'm rambling now and I lost my point. But okay, so that's such an issue, a true bread and butter issue for millions of people. So I think they will get credit. But what do we see? We see Trump forcing Republicans to gerrymander to make sure they keep control of the House in the midterms, because the party that wins a presidential election usually loses seats in the midterms. So they want to make sure that doesn't happen. And we don't see any strategizing to fight that. Should Democrats do it? Should they not do it? Should they do the same thing? But really no recognition of the radical nature of what he wants to do, or the role they played in bringing it about, or doing something really different, because they're hoping to win without doing anything different. They're hoping to win with without saying anything serious, without really changing anything politically. That is their goal, and they can, point fingers at Trump for ripping down the White House to build a ballroom or something I don't care about, quite frankly. But at any rate, that's the kind of thing they are hoping will get people to the polls.
My pet peeve about it is that Obamacare is so insufficient. It is
absolutely
insufficient, and they have people fighting tooth and nail for this insufficient thing, which I feel like is the position that we are continuously put in over and over again, where Democrats are like, well, hey, we're standing up for this thing that doesn't really effectively meet your needs, but hey, what they want is worse. So, you should thank us for this thing that doesn't quite meet your needs.
But you're absolutely right. There should have been a public option. We need a real public health care system. It's still, the Obamacare is based, I call it Nixon care. It's what Nixon proposed in the 70s, which is based on what the Heritage Foundation and other conservative think tanks always proposed, to have this healthcare system that's still wedded to the private sector, still wedded to these healthcare corporations. And that's the most you're going to get. But it is what people have. And if you get rid of it without replacing it with anything, that's something that will actually motivate people. But you're absolutely right. It's inadequate. It's still expensive. I mean, even with the subsidies, Obamacare, so-called, is still expensive. So it's ironic that, we have a far-right party and a center-right party. So the center-right party says, yeah, we'll have this corporate health care thing. And the far-right's like, no, we need to get rid of it altogether and cost people millions of dollars and they'll hate us. But they're still wedded to doing that.
Yeah, so now we have to fight tooth and nail for an insufficient thing, and apparently thanks to Democrats for holding the line for it. It's so aggravating to me because it's like,
it is.
I give you an example. I was in Egypt. This was years ago, and I was smoking a cigarette. I was at a doctor's office. Every time I go to a location, I have to get treatments, and I have to pay for those treatments out of pocket. I can tell you how much a dialysis visit costs in pretty much every country around the world. Every country. I was sitting in Egypt. And I was waiting for them to call me back. And one of the guys that was sitting there, I thought the guy couldn't speak English, but he's smoking a cigarette. He also smokes a cigarette. So him and I are smoking in the lobby. It's Egypt, right? So it's a thing. And he turns to me, he says, how much are you paying for this? And I tell him how much I'm paying for the individual treatment. And he's like, ugh. He says, my government covers this, right? But he is effectively saying he's from Germany. And regardless of where he goes, where he needs treatments, the government covers the treatment. And if you're in Europe, same thing. Anywhere in Europe, they can go pretty much any other place in Europe. That stuff is covered, meaning you don't have to pay that out of pocket. And I can tell you the number of countries where I've been to where they're like, God, man, I don't know why you guys do healthcare the way you do healthcare. Like where they're just shocked by the whole thing in the way that the U.S. effectively rapes the population on this notion of healthcare. You have countries that have health insurance, but they also have government insurance where the poorest person still has quality healthcare. And if you have a job or something like that, you have extra things that you want to get, you have private healthcare that can supply those needs. We don't do that. There's Medicare, but Medicare only pays 80%, which if you, God forbid, have a stroke, how much is 80% going to cover? Obviously it's 80%, but if you're paying $1 million, that's $200,000 extra. It is aggravating to me. Healthcare is my white whale of an issue.
Well, it should be. It should be everyone's. Excuse me, but it shows you who runs this country. This country is run by the 1%, the ruling class, and they don't want people to have anything. They want us to live in precarity. They want us to live with uncertainty. They want a healthcare system that ties you to a job that you don't want to lose. And, many people have asked, it's like, well, wouldn't corporations save money if they didn't have to pay for your health care? Yes, but then you'd have freedom. Then you could say, take this job and shove it. Then who knows where things could lead? You might get some big idea about having a right to something else. So it benefits them in many ways to keep you in precarity, to make your life difficult, to keep you quiescent, and just in a state where you're less likely to speak up, less likely to really organize, as we've been talking about, and that you'll accept the status quo. So politicians, big corporations, they will tinker around the edges. I mean, Obamacare basically gave everybody the right to buy insurance and pay too much for it. The Medicaid expansion was actually the best thing, and there's still some holdout states, and it looks like a map of the Confederacy when you see the states that never took the Medicaid expansion seriously, literally. That was actually the best thing about it. So if you live in New York and you're on Medicaid, you can get pretty good care. But that's a bigger problem, and that's a bigger problem that excuse me, these marches are not going to solve. That we need a completely different system, and we have to be struggling to get that.
I had a guest, Jason Smith, who lives in China in Beijing, and he pointed out, he says, yeah, my wife ended up in hospital for 2 weeks. And I think the name of the video is China Unveiled or something like that, or everything you wanted to know about China but didn't know to ask. And he breaks down the Chinese healthcare system. And like my mouth is on the floor, because what he's explaining to me is effectively, yeah, she was in the hospital for 2 weeks getting the best of care. And I think she said she paid $100 total, and it might not have even been that much. And even in Indonesia, when I hit my head, I ended up going to the emergency room. They do an x-ray. They prescribe pain medication. And I think I paid $10. I don't even know if I paid that much for it. Like, we do healthcare in such a weird way. It's so aggravating in the States. And I know Indonesia is a different financial system and everything else, but still, it's aggravating.
It's greed. Corporate greed.
Oh, please.
That's what it is. No, I'm just saying it's corporate greed.
Oh, it is. Oh, 1,000% it is. They know they have you over a barrel.
Controlled by the
you have
ruling
cancer,
class.
pay me. You have, whatever this illness, pay me. And nobody is going to say, don't sew my finger back on. How much is it going to cost? They just want the finger sewn back on. When are you guys going to, and this is going to be the last question, when are you guys going to reopen the government? I leave for a few months and you guys shut the government down. When is this? What are you guys planning?
It's hard to say. Trump is hanging tough. And he
doesn't care. I don't think he cares. Like,
he does not care that people are suffering. He does not care at all. And it serves people right who still want to support him. I'm sorry. I've got sometimes that pettiness in me comes out. But something's going to break. Something has to break outside of Washington. And we need to see people angry enough at enough people. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I always thought was funny. She was liberals always fixate on somebody who's supposed to hate, but she is openly saying that they need to keep funding the Obamacare subsidies, that people are suffering. Now, so far, most Republicans are scared of Trump. But I think if things break enough, if there's enough of a crisis, that will break the log jam. And it's an issue that affects enough people that Democrats can't backslide either. So it's the perfect in this way issue to see what everybody's really made of, because it's something people literally cannot live without.
Yeah. What, on November 1st, something happens? Is it that they've passed the horizon, in which case the bills go up and they can't do anything about it?
And they still can, but the bills have already started going up. People are getting bills now for I guess that's what you mean. Yeah, November, these Obamacare subsidies, people are already seeing what it will cost if they don't negotiate this in Congress. And it's awful that so many people are suffering because of it. But the other thing that makes these big marches bad, is that people need political education, need to literally learn about how to organize rather than this big spectacle. Excuse me, learn more about how our system really runs, how to fight it, struggle over how to do that. And I'm hoping that something good will come out of this crisis, but it cannot happen if people fetishize having a big march instead of really learning how to organize.
Nice. Margaret, you always have my appreciation for coming on. The audience loves you. I love you to bits. Thank you for this. Margaret Kimberley, senior columnist and editor for Black Agenda Report, author of Presidential, Black America and the Presidents. I'm not sure if you had a new book out. For some reason, I wanted to say that you did, but that could be.
I did. It's a couple of anthologies. One of them is Countering Counterinsurgency, and the other is
I can't see it.
From the Flag to the Cross. Fascism American Style. And I contributed to both.
I wasn't wrong. I was like,
no, you were
for some
not.
reason, I think she has another book out. Margaret, thank you for this. You guys can check her out at Freedom Ride blog. You can also check out at Black Agenda Report. Definitely check out her books.
Yes, Wednesday's Black Agenda Report days. We have a whole new set of great articles today, blackagendareport.com.
I'm surprised y'all don't do video.
We are. Hold on, wait.
Because y'all have a roster.
It's coming. It's coming.
Okay.
It's in the works.
You have a fantastic rest of your day, and thank you for this. Always appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. We have come to the end for about 30 minutes. Professor Marandi asked if he can come on a little bit later. He wants to come on at 11. I told him that's perfectly okay, so I'm going to have to reload this for Professor Marandi. At 12:30, we're going to have Alex Craner. That was the earliest he can get in, so I appreciate him for fitting me into the schedule, because otherwise I wasn't going to be able to get him this week. So we have come to a ceasefire. We've come to a ceasefire for 30 minutes. Let's go to the chat first before we end this. Gifted Jamal membership, Red Dye, welcome to the family. Thank you for that. You have my appreciation for joining. And Red Dye again. What is this one? Excellent lineup, Jamal, from outset to throughout. Well, thank you for that, Red Dye. And we are not finished. We have more to do. There's more work. There's more work. So I'm going to call this a day just for 20 minutes. I will see you guys in a few minutes. You be safe. You be kind to the degree that you can be kind. And I will be back in a few with Professor Marandi. Thanks all. This and this.